issues that impact our whole state, and we'll have board members introduce themselves. Vice Chair Kelly, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, my name is Cole Kelly. I represent District 12 and Vice Chair of the Finance Committee. Happy to be here this morning.
Thank you. I thought I saw Chair Hymas. Go ahead.
Thank you, Matt Hymas. I represent District 10 in Tooele County. We're doing intros, right, Cindy? I
Yes.
just jumped on. I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Tooele County, the west side of Salt Lake County and the west side of Utah County. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think there are just three of us to start this morning. If Member Booth or Member Bogus come in, we'll get them in their introduction. So we'll go ahead and start with our USBE staff introductions. And looks like we have Leonard Brooks and Burke Sears.
How you doing? I'm Leonard Brooks. I work in the USB IT department. I'm the senior PM. I oversee the legacy applications and portions of the Houston project.
Wonderful. We appreciate you. We know those are huge projects going on right now, and grateful for all the work that you're doing.
No worries.
Thank you. And Burke.
Good morning. I'm Burke Sears. I'm a senior manager with IT with software engineering, and I've been with USBE for 17 years. And it's good to be with you this morning.
17 years is a long time. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for dedicating so much of your life to helping the students and families and educators all across the state of Utah with everything that you're doing for us. Thank you so much, both to Leonard and Burke. We appreciate you. And it looks like we have Member Booth who has joined us. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Randy Booth from District 13, representing Nebo School District and Provo School District. Thank you.
Great. So glad that you're here. Well, we have a long day, and that's why we're starting at 8:15 instead of our later start time. Just so members are aware, we will end promptly at noon, whether we're finished or not. And we will take a break, a 5-minute break at right around 10 o'clock. Hopefully that works for everybody. And we'll go ahead and start. We have some public comment requests. Looks like we have Adam Robinson from South Summit School District Business Administrator. Oh, I think he said that in writing.
Yeah,
That's just a comment that's posted to back up.
right. Yeah. So I talked to him, Chair Davis, and he just said, go ahead with this, with the written comment. So that's in the back. Okay.
So do we just need to leave that publicly, or does someone want to read that? Is it lengthy? I mean, like, how can someone read it, or?
Yeah. Well, yeah, Cammie, can you display it? So.
And I apologize, I didn't see that after it got added.
No problem.
I think they added it to the agenda item. Which one was it? Does it say on the thing? I'm sorry.
It says Adam Robinson, South Summit School District Business Administrator.
And which item above it?
On item 1.3, well, 1.1 public comment, and then it's item 1.3, which is R277726.
Okay, go ahead and share it.
Statewide online education program.
Yeah. So I was going to say this is the context of this is it's related to his concerns or, with the SOEP rule or the SOEP program, I should say. So now the date at the top, this is an ongoing concern or yeah, you can see down in item number 2 or well, there's more than one concern. So if you scroll down. This has been, an ongoing concerns, I should say, with the SOE program from their perspective. I mean, do you want me to read it out loud
You
or?
know what? I actually did read this now that I see the graphic. I
It's
just
been in
didn't
there.
put the
Yeah.
name together, so I apologize. I
No,
thought
no,
it was
that's
something
fine.
that came in later.
No.
Yeah, no, you don't need to read that whole graphic. I would just point members to that in backup if they haven't read it yet. And just be aware of these concerns, and that may takes more than what we have time for today. We may need to push that one on till next month, but we'll talk about the timeliness of that when we get to it. Thank you for bringing that up. It looks like now next we have Royce Van Tassel from the Utah Association of Public Charter Schools, Executive Director.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Good. I apologize. I am standing outside. The morning didn't go quite the way I expected. I'm getting a tire fixed. That also means that in my comments on the revisions to 726, I'm not going to be able to point to precise lines because I don't have the document in front of me. But if you look in the section on students' rights, it begins roughly on line 1000. You will see a couple of lines. I want to say it's roughly 1004 and 1005 that that really compel an SOEP provider to enroll a student that is under-enrolled if they want. And that's a little bit of an awkward situation insofar as these schools may or may not have the staffing for that. That's class that they want to sign up for may be full. And I don't think that piece is terribly difficult to resolve. You could say, well, I know Ben and I talked yesterday about a possible brief amendment that would say if there is room in the class, something like that. The second, and I think perhaps more challenging concern says that they have to do that at any time, which is to say we're going to eliminate any deadlines in the enrollment process. And you, as a state board, this committee understand that we want to be as flexible as possible, and yet deadlines do matter. And there's experience with the two charter schools that act as SOEP providers that students who historically have not registered timely but opt to do so later they're not likely to complete successfully. And so eliminating deadlines by which a student needs to register seems a little bit of a stretch and overreach, and we would ask you to fix those two problems in the proposed amendments to the rule.
Thank you. Appreciate that feedback from both of you.
Thank
you. And good luck with the tire. Next, we have Courtney England from Spectrum Academy, Executive Director of Finance.
Hello, good morning. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Just real quick, my name is Courtney England. I'm with Spectrum Academy. I'm the Executive Director of Finance. I just wanted to let the committee know that I will be on the meeting today to take any questions that might arise for the SPED funding item that's on the agenda today regarding Rule R277479-3.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, let's dive in. Actually, before we do that, we've had Member Bogus join. Member Bogus, would you like to introduce yourself? I thought we saw her. Did she jump? Did we lose her?
I apologize, Member Davis. I thought I was unmuted.
Oh,
So,
that's okay.
so I just kept talking.
Well, welcome. Hello.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Christina Bogus. I serve West Jordan, Taylorsville, and Kearns in District 8 here in the Salt Lake City Valley.
Wonderful. So
Thank
great
you.
to have you. Thank you.
Thank you.
For you and Member Booth both, since we're starting early, we will end promptly at noon for those who need to drive into the USBE building. And we also will take a 5-minute break at 10 o'clock-ish.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for coming early today. Let's start on 1.2, which is distribution of funds from the trust distribution account and administration of the school land trust program amendment and continuation. And it looks like we have Director Paula Plant and Elise Newey here with us today. I think one of you is going to lead us out.
Sure, I can start and then Paula fill in if you have anything to add. So Deputy Superintendent of Policy Elise Newey, this rule is being brought because we had a recommendation from our finance team that we should not have some of this in rule. So if you scroll down, it's section starting on line 330. So this was some lines in the rule that had previously allowed a school to take an advance from a future year land trust distribution. And we're not going to allow that anymore. So we want to make sure that that's no longer in rule. And that is the only change that's being brought today. Director Plant, anything else that I missed?
No, that's it. Thanks.
Director Plant, is the Trust Land Advisory Committee supportive of this?
Yes, they voted last Monday to support it.
Okay, thank you. Chair Hymas,
Happy to make a motion, Chair.
please do.
Well, I said that, but I need help. Okay. There we go. I move that the committee continue and approve R277-477 distribution of funds from the trust distribution account and administration of the school land trust program draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for continuation and approval on second and final reading.
Thank you. There's a motion on the board that the committee continue and approve R277-477 distribution of funds from the trust distribution account and administration of the school land trust program. Distribution. Is someone speaking or breaking up? Cole or Vice Chair Kelly?
Yeah, I'm just curious, have we had issues with this? Have there been schools that have continually dipped into future allocations and maybe getting themselves into a hole, or I'm curious for the reason for the change.
Director Plant?
Sure. So
before you speak, Director Plant, someone has a microphone that is on and we're getting a lot of sound. Okay, go ahead, Director Plant.
Thank you, Paula Plant, Director of School Children's Trust. Actually, this is a recommendation that came from business administrators a few years ago. And the way it's written in the rule is not the way it has been implemented. And in addition to this, so we went to finance and had a conversation with them, and they indicated that since this is a school level program, borrowing money against another school is not an appropriate practice, and that we just needed to remove the language. Does that help?
Vice Chair Kelly?
Yeah. So I mean, I guess they don't know for the next year, they don't know what the allocations are going to be exactly, right? And so because they don't know what the allocations are going to be for the next year, if you're dipping into next year, you may end up taking more than what you could have or should have been allocated. Is that?
Actually, the times when it was being used, it was not being used for really large amounts of money so that it would have taken away their distribution for the following year. It was more in cases when they ordered a bunch of computers and they turned out to be more expensive than they planned on. And so they were dipping into, but what they really weren't doing is dipping into next year's funding. What they were doing is taking from the LEA total amount of trust lands money that was coming to the LEA, and they were taking from other schools' balance that had not spent all their money. And then before the school year began and the new distribution came out, then they were replacing that money so that the school they borrowed from would be whole at the beginning of the school year. But they were also required to go to their boards to get approval before they did that. And that was not happening.
Okay. Okay.
So we're just removing the concern for the movement of money.
Right.
Because the boards weren't being included, correct?
Partly, right.
And because
partly.
the practice is difficult to monitor and stay compliant and all of those things.
Correct. Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Chair Kelly, do you still have a?
No, I'll lower that hand. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Okay, seeing no hands, we have a motion on the board that the committee continue and approve R277-477 distribution of funds from the trust distribution account and administration of the school land trust program draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for continuation and approval on second and final reading. Still seeing no hands. Those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? That passes unanimously. Our next item is R277-726 Statewide Online Education Program Amendment. And we have Dr. Elise Newey and our Achievement Support Services Director, Tammy Gear, both online. Elise, do you want to start out or do you want to have Tammy start out?
Sure, I'll start out with a quick overview and then Tammy fill in the key details. So we're bringing this rule to you today. Staff really wanted to do kind of an overhaul of this rule. So you'll see a lot of changes. I would point first to the definitions. The definitions, we have added some, taken out some that are no longer relevant, and tried to make things a little bit more clear. And then you'll see the next few sections are all completely stricken out and then replaced with brand new language at the bottom. I will say, from my reviews, not a lot of this is super brand new, but wanted to make sure that it was really clear and really coherent and concise for LEAs. So while it looks like all brand new language at the bottom, a lot of it is just cleaned up previous language. Tammy, what else do they need to know?
I know there were some, I'm sorry, Tammy Gear, Director of Achievement Support Services. I know there have been some concerns. We have talked to the Utah School Superintendents Association, answered some questions. One of the major things we did was if it was already in statute, and then again put in the rule, we have taken that out because we felt like it didn't need to be in both places. So that made it a lot more clear and clean and concise. And I know that the public comments that were submitted by Summit, most of their concerns, again, the issues that they have come from statutes. So there's not much we can do about that. Any other questions? Sorry.
Members, do you have any questions? Chair Hymas?
Yeah, thank you. I just with the comments made earlier today, I see that there were some adjustments made, but can we scroll, what was it, 10:02? I know Royce said he didn't have line numbers, but I just asking, Elise, Cindy, maybe you know, did we address that concern of saying a student can come in and out whenever they want, essentially,
Mm-mm.
or is that still something that needs to be at least looked at?
It's still there, and I wonder, and it sounds like that may be in code, but I wonder if we, Director Gear, how timely is this? Does this need to be done today, or would we have time to revisit this again at our next meeting?
We have time to revisit it. It's just cleaning it up. There's nothing that needs to be done right away. It is important to note, though, that those are all in code. You'll see on line 1000 that if they are dropping a physical course and going to replace it with a program course, they do have to follow the primary LEA's established deadlines so that we don't have kids dropping a physical course in the middle of a semester, which messes with, teachers and stuff. But the part that they may enroll in program courses at any time during the calendar year, if they're under enrolled, that is straight from code.
Okay.
So, Chair, pushing it off wouldn't really, unless we have a secret legislative session between now and June, we really don't have a lot of flexibility on our end anyway. Is that what I'm understanding?
No, but I just wanted to go back through the rule again and review the public comments from both public commenters today. When we can do that, it's nice to be able to do that. So I would suggest putting this, moving this to our June agenda. If I guess I need to make a motion, I would move that we move this to our June agenda. Do we have discussion on that?
No, ma'am, I would support that.
Okay. Any others? Seeing no hands, members, please vote. Those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. Thank you.
I'm starting to feel like we didn't need to start at 8:15.
Just you wait, my friend. No, we may not have, and that would be great if we have extra time. The extra long lunch.
Look at us go.
You're gonna go out for a fancy steak lunch today, maybe. Okay, we're on action item 1.4, request for use of Utah State Board of Education discretionary funds for development of playground equipment. And we have Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones and Assistant Superintendent of Operations Deborah Jacobson.
Yeah, so Madam Chair, at your direction, if we could just orient the committee members and the public to the backup document. Actually, let's start with the discretionary funds report. The request is to seek federal mineral lease money, and I just want to make sure everybody knows that actually my camera, sorry, my thing's blocking the thing. So if you can see in the remaining column, so I'm in the upper right quadrant of the discretionary funds report. There is sufficient federal mineral lease funds available. There's a little over $1 million still remaining in federal mineral lease. So I just wanted to start there. So now if we could go back to the proposal for research and development. So there's been some iterations, as you recall, Madam Chair, members of the committee. This was first presented to the committee last month. There was questions that were asked, and rightfully so, about the particular project and making sure that it ties in for allowable use of the federal mineral lease funds. The questions or concerns have been addressed, I feel, just from a staff perspective, in this draft 3. There was a couple of drafts that, draft 2 was put into the backups, but we're to draft 3 now. One of the key questions was, we don't want to use research and development money for what really amounts to a district or, local LEA concern or compliance with ADA. This is strictly money that would go towards this research and development project, as is demonstrated in this particular I thought, very well written design to ensure that this is a research and development project. So if you'll scroll down a little bit without reading each word, you can go down and you can see that first and foremost, one of the key tests is, does this align with your strategies, your strategic plan? So it does draw those out, safe and healthy schools, those types of particulars within your plan. So then if you scroll down a little bit further, it does a pretty good detail into the project design. It'll build ramps and surfacing, inclusive swing and adaptive equipment for students with disabilities, the sensory play elements and the social play zones designed to encourage cooperative interaction. And if we scroll down a little bit further, so I thought this was a good indicator of the indicators of what they'll be researching and developing as far as, a test, if you will, or a project that where they start out with baseline data, and then they have a projected outcome, and this ties really well into really well with the use of federal mineral lease dollars. So I'm trying to stay in that lane about allowable use of funds, advising the committee on this. I don't have a position as a staff member either way, whether you should do this or not, but we just wanted to make sure that this is something that would qualify for use for federal mineral lease funds. So I'll just pause right there. Yeah, you can scroll through the rest of it and see if there's any questions or concerns, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We have Vice Chair Kelly.
Yeah, my question is about the amount. I know that the school had raised some money.
Yeah, that's further down.
We had discussed the total amount, but is the 250 still what is being asked for the research for this?
Madam Chair, no.
Yeah, so I'm seeing estimated total cost there at 150. 30,000 has already been raised, and so we're looking at 120,000, not 250. Is that accurate?
Madam Chair, that's correct.
Thank you. Good questions. I ran into a parent literally just 5 days ago who we kind of worked years ago to earn money at our neighborhood school to do something like this, and it was so hard. It was so hard to earn the money, and we did it. And we have, situations now where our kids in wheelchairs and other different situations can participate with the playground equipment. And this research could open the door for other schools to include these in the plans initially, so that as they're being built, they're built with some of these things in mind, as opposed to have to retroactively go back and resurface and do a variety of things. I mean, we don't even think about the rubber chips or the wood chips are just a nightmare, even just to get a wheelchair into the space. So a lot of things to think about. Vice Chair Kelly.
Yeah, I'll make a motion, and then if I can comment to that, but I recommend I'd make the motion that the board approves the use of $120,000 of federal mineral lease for this research project.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor that the committee recommends that the board approves the use of $120,000 of federal mineral lease funding for this research project.
And I make sure that we add research in front of projects, so that and that's one of the things that I think is important. Sorry, I interrupted you there, Chair Davis.
I like that. I mean, I just said it, but I like that you're asking for it to be added in writing. So can we add the word research in front of project in the motion? It without objection from the board or the committee?
Well, that would be my motion, is to have that there. So yeah.
Okay. Great. Any discussion to the motion?
Yeah, one of the things I know there's been concerns, and I'm one of them. I'm one that has expressed concern about maybe precedent of, is the state board now going to be building playgrounds for students? And I think what we need to emphasize and what is important here is this is a research project, and we're conducting research to look at, is this going to make an impact for students? Is this going to, allow, students to interact with each other in a way that maybe they previously haven't been able to interact? And then gathering that data, and as Deputy Superintendent Jones mentioned, they have a baseline. The presentation of the research looks like, we can get some data back that I think can be beneficial to other schools moving forward. And so I think, I want to express that I will be supporting this motion, because of the research component of it, and making sure that it could be, the research component can be used by other schools to see if they see the value in doing it moving forward, and not that the USBE is going to be funding playgrounds moving forward.
Good clarification. And in fact, the FML funding can only be used for research. It can't be used for other things. So appreciate that. Seeing no other hands and committee members, I'm kind of scrolling. So if I miss you, speak up. Member Bogus.
Yeah, I don't think buying these things is research. Doing the research is research, but purchasing playground equipment is not research. So paying to evaluate the data, that's research. Paying to collect the data, that might even be considered research. But paying for the equipment itself is not actually research. I think we're stepping into really tenuous space here, in my opinion.
Who works with the internal controls over federal mineral lease money? Oh, but while we think about answering that, a member Booth has a question. So we can just get some clarification on that from our staff. Member Booth?
So my question is, do we need to purchase the equipment in order to conduct the research?
Yeah. Madam Chair?
Yes.
So to Board Member Booth's question, so federal mineral lease is research and development. We can develop, so in order to conduct the research, you can use the funding to purchase products or services, or just in order to conduct the research project. So
Right.
but I do want to I do understand Board Member Bogus's concerns, and that is the reason why we went back and said, look, this has to be all about the research and development to substantiate whether or not this makes a difference to students with special needs, it being the inclusive playground equipment, the ramps, those types of things. So my understanding is these are special products, equipment, so that the research can be conducted. So
Okay. Thank you very much.
And also maybe so from start to finish, people can assess, but I'm wondering, do you feel, Deputy Jones, that we need, because as I'm passionate about this, and so I'm apt to jump on board, but do we need to have a perspective from anyone else, any auditors or anything, to look through the federal mineral lease qualifications? Or do you feel that you've done that and you feel pretty confident, or would it be wise to do that before the full board if we move this forward?
Well, so I can pull up the federal mineral lease code, the code for use of the federal mineral lease dollars. And you can bring in Assistant Superintendent Jacobson. We've struggled with federal mineral lease. It's not very definitive. I mean, it says research and development. to promote education, right? To promote kids. I mean, I don't have it exactly worded, but I could pull that up right now. Or, the committee can always get a legal opinion, right? I'm not an attorney. I'm not, do it, but I do understand the risk of this being construed as, well, we're building playgrounds, we're doing those things. Well, we really did try to do our due diligence and say, well, this is being presented as a research project, but you have to buy the equipment to do the research, to see if it makes a difference if these are on there. Because the other piece to it too is a lot of in the decision-making processes that LAAs do, they rely on other studies, other research to say, yes, if you buy this equipment, it might make a difference, or does, or has been shown to make a difference to your students at your particular school. That doesn't mean they'll come to us for the funding. It just helps them to have this research to, and development of a particular playground so that they can make more informed decisions with their parents at the local school level based on this one example of a particular research and development project. Again, I'm not trying to advocate either way. We're just, because our interest is always in the acceptable use of funds. But then an auditor or an attorney might opine differently, I mean, but if you feel like that would be due diligence to do that, then by all means, please, keep it, maybe send it to another, to June, keep it to June. And then in the interim between this meeting and next meeting, we can get a legal opinion on whether or not an attorney feels like, it could be our AAGs or an outside attorney that we've hired to see if their interpretation of the code, which I feel is not very detailed or specific to say, yes, you can do this, right? It just, if you can tie in that it will benefit students or in the interest of deciding whether it benefits students, you can conduct.
Sure. Okay.
So, yeah.
We'll see if members want to, we'll see if we want to amend that or not with that stipulation. Member Bogus?
Thank you, Chair. In this proposal, I actually don't see any money for research. I see a lot of money for playground equipment and zero money for research.
Well, so Madam Chair, if I may, I think that's fair. I think we're in the space though of, well, in order to do the research, you have to have the equipment to do the research with. That, by installing the ramps, by, putting in the particular accessible equipment, that enables the research to occur. So I think that's your decisive point there is, do you buy the equipment so that the research project can be conducted, in development of the research project or not? I think that's your key decision point there. So
May I follow up, Chair?
Yes.
So are we going to, let's say this passes the board, are we going to then get a $30,000 request to actually complete the research instead of buying the equipment? Because this is implying that the research is free, and it's not free. It has a cost somewhere.
Madam Chair, I can't speak to what would occur should the board adopt that. I think what we're looking at here is they're saying that, they've tried to raise the money. If they can get the $120,000 out of the FML to buy the equipment to conduct the research will be conducted by the individual that, Board Member Hall worked with or contacted to do this. So.
And I also know have some private donations, so they may have additional to help with that as well. But also we can add an amendment on this if we want to get our AAGs or someone to give a legal opinion on it. Vice Chair Kelly?
Yeah, I'd say it's hard to study the stars without a telescope, and you need the equipment to conduct the research. And so I think the use of the money to buy the equipment is appropriate. But once you have the equipment, I think then what their proposal is, they're looking at the data and the interaction of kids during recess, they've created a baseline here. So I disagree that there's no baseline. They have a baseline of data that they're going to look at and then say, was there improvement here? Did we see an impact? And moving forward, when schools build or when LEAs build a new school, this could be research that they could utilize to say, do we, we can build the playground that has traditionally been built for $30,000, or we could build, a playground like what is being suggested in this research project for an additional $20,000. Do we think that the benefits, of spending that extra 20,000 is worth the student growth that they saw in the research project? So I think there's wisdom in moving forward with it.
In looking at Member Bogus's comments, in fairness, there are already playgrounds that have this type of equipment.
Yeah.
And some type of research could be done with those. The difference, I think, with this piece, from what I'm understanding, is the opportunity to look at it from start to finish, because you can have a baseline with it not existing and then a baseline with it existing. And also they can take qualitative and anecdotal, parent, kids, things like that on the qualitative side. So that will it make a difference, and for whom and to what extent? That, I think, will be the difference. Because I've been trying to wrap my head around this too, because I know there are some that already have this. I would like to put an amendment on this.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I think it might be a value add if I did, let's refer to Utah Code 5921-1.
Okay.
The legislature appropriates these funds for three primary purposes: planning, strategic development, and feasibility studies for regional growth. 2, construction and maintenance of public facilities, building or repairing infrastructure like roads, sewers, or public buildings. Provision of public services, funding essential service required by the community. The acceptable uses criteria as it relates strictly to education is distributed to school districts impacted by mineral development. So districts get FML money too, but they may have already identified or budgeted for other things. So it's intended to be used for programs at the specific school for which they were allocated at the local level, but you also, as the board, get federal mineral lease money. So when we have looked at this in the past, it's up to the board. That's why it's in your discretionary funds to use your federal mineral lease accordingly. But if you would like, we can get a legal opinion on Utah Code 21-1.
I think it would be helpful. And also, has this particular district already used their federal mineral lease money?
I don't know. Yeah, that I don't know. So I'd have to check with them. So,
I think we could find out those two things. And are they intending to contribute some to this also? And maybe that's an unfair request if it's going to be our research project. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, and that's all we're trying to do is just make sure we've had, obviously there's board members that have made this request. So staff, we're just trying to facilitate the process of determining whether or not the board wants to use your discretionary federal mineral lease funds for this. But slow is smooth, smooth is fast, right? We can definitely try and, get more of a legal opinion or anything at your direction or the committee, if you want to bring it back to June. So.
Seems like in the past, we've just been able to say, in the full board, can people be prepared to answer these questions as they come up? But in light of the recent letter, do we need to ask in a formal amendment for a legal opinion?
I don't think so. Well, I don't know. Now I think we're in the, Robert's rules space, I guess, but you could just, if you want to keep it in the committee till next month, I think you can do that at this level and just say, tell staff to go get a legal opinion? Or are you talking about if it goes to the board?
If it goes to the full, I'm
Sure. You
comfortable
can do that on a contingency.
sending
Yeah,
it to the
sure.
full board and then adding a legal
I see.
opinion.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Okay, well, in light of our recent letter, let's formalize it. I move to amend this motion by requesting a formal legal opinion to accompany the motion to the full board. Any discussion to that motion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those
Aye.
opposed?
I'll say no, Cindy, on this one.
Okay. Okay, that passes with Chair Hymas opposed. That's to the amendment, Chair Hymas. And now we're headed to the full, Member Booth? Okay, now we're back to the full motion. That the committee recommends that the board approves the use of 120,000 of federal mineral lease funding for this research project with a legal opinion to accompany it. Or maybe I need to just say as amended, but I think Cami will write it the correct way. Seeing no additional hands, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
No.
Or,
Okay.
well, no, I guess. If Matt's going to say no, I'm a no.
Okay.
Well, I think you know what I mean.
I think you said aye when I asked for no, so that meant no.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, that meant
Exactly.
no.
Thank you for that.
Okay, I'm going to digress, but if any of you ever watched I Love Lucy, that conversation reminds me of the time when they were driving that 100-foot trailer and she says, turn right here, and he turns right. And she said, what are you doing? You're supposed to turn left. And he said, you said turn right. And she said, I was trying to say turn right here, left. Anyway, that was one of my favorite episodes. So I digress. That passes with members Kelly, Davis, and Booth in favor, and members Hymas and Bogus opposed. And I'm just jotting that down quickly so I can remember on my sheet. Okay, thank you. Members, we're on item 1.5. Request for use of fiscal year 2027 fund from the board's budget for board member regional meetings. You can help me procedurally, but the sponsor, if that's what we call it, of this proposal has withdrawn the proposal and no longer wants to pursue the proposal. So parliamentarians, do we need to, since it's on the agenda as a committee, do we need to do anything, or can we just take no action and be done?
It does belong, if I could, Cindy, it does belong to the committee. So we could take no action and it would be done. But it doesn't just automatically disappear to your point here.
Okay.
This is
So
the-
if nobody makes a motion, then it's done, right?
Yeah.
This is the listening
listening
towards.
tour, yeah. Okay.
Mhm. Yeah, I got an email from member Carrie yesterday. So
I don't have a motion for you if you're waiting for one.
I'm seeing no hands, so I think we can just move on. So we can just put no action taken on that then. 1.6. We have Spectrum Academy and special education funding formulas, and we have our minimum school program administrator, Dale Frost, to get into the weeds with us a bit on this. Thank you. I think we have him. Dale, do we have you?
I don't see him. Sam's here though. Man, I don't see Dale. Sam.
I see Dale's screen, but not Dale.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I see. Huh.
Sam, do you want to talk us through this, or should we go to the next item and come back to this one when Dale may be having some technical issues or something?
Oh, maybe Sam is too. So let's see.
Sorry, my internet just dropped, but I'm back now. Sorry.
Perfect timing, right? Murphy's Law.
Did you want to go, Sam?
Oh,
Or do you want me to start?
If Dale's here, let's go ahead, Dale.
Okay, great. Yeah, if Chair, if I can share, I think I have the ability to. Let me make sure. Do you see these policy options for Spectrum on the screen?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. Before I dive into these, I wanted to just very quickly level set with you on the existing formulas. For a special education student, any student who has an IEP, they generate 2 WPUs is the intention. If they receive less than 180 minutes of instruction, specialized instruction, so like SPED services on their IEP, they receive a general education WPU and an add-on WPU. It's more than 180 minutes, they receive a self-contained WPU and a SPED add-on WPU. I just got a message that I'm invisible. Oh, okay. Well,
we see your background, but we don't see your face.
That is interesting. Okay.
You background. You're wearing an invisibility cloak.
I'm not yet an AI. But I just wanted to be clear here that when we're talking about different formula options, basically we're adding or changing on top of the 2 WPUs one way or the other.
Can you stop for 1 second?
Sure.
Does a student currently who is self-contained generate the same amount of funding as a student who is not self-contained? Because these numbers are the same on the bottom.
Yeah, the answer is yes.
That's what I thought. Thank you.
The only difference between the two is that all of the funding for a student in the self-contained program, it goes to essentially the LEA's SPED budget. That's the only difference versus half. Okay.
Wait, say that one more time.
The only difference is where the funds go within an LEA's budget. For a SPED resource student, half of their funding essentially, and this is very generalized, there are other funding streams and all these things, but the basic ones that go to fund basic operations, half the funding goes to the general education budget. That's the K-12 formula, and half goes to the special education budget. Does that make sense? Where for a special ed self-contained student, both of the WPUs go into the special education budget. They're 2 different formulas, but they all get rolled into special education.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Crystal clear. Thank you.
Okay. So as we've discussed, that's the intention at the very high level. And we've been having conversations since the fall that we discovered because of an unintended quirk in the formula, certain charter schools were generating more than 1 WPU under the special education add-on formula. And you and the board made changes so that we can phase that down over the next 3 years. Spectrum Academy, they were approved for an expansion into St. George, and under the rule changes that you made on those caps, You exempted LEAs with more than 60% special education kids, which right now only applies to Spectrum Academy, just because they're very much unique as an LEA. Nobody is anywhere near the same percentage of special education students. The caps would have impacted them 4 or 5 times higher than anybody else. But there's still the question on what to do with Spectrum. And then if they expand according to the rule, they lose those additional WPUs and basically are in a place where they can't expand. So that's where I'm going to go through. There are different policy options, and I tried to cover the whole gamut here. So I'll quickly go through them. Number one is the status quo, where if they did expand, they would lose, more than $8 million. And so they're basically forced to never expand. You as a board could pass a waiver, up to a certain amount of time for Spectrum Academy. From what I've heard from Spectrum, regardless of the time period, because the temporary nature of the waiver, they would likely not expand. They would have to take on, that's quite they'd put themselves out there financially quite a bit if with a temporary waiver. Number 3 here is to amend the rule or statute to exempt LEAs, essentially apply the same kind of rule, but you'll see here we're using 70%, not 60%, as we kind of went back and forth on different options. 70% seemed to be a better cutoff. So the challenge with doing a permanent exemption is that it would perpetuate the double standard that currently exists and then makes it really unclear on the formula what you do going forward. So, we wouldn't have to eliminate the WPUs that are those inflated WPUs for Spectrum, but it doesn't, if you exempt them from that part of the rule, I don't know what to do formula wise for those St. George students. And so they wouldn't receive any funding in that first year. So there's a lot of questions about number 3. As you can see, the dollar amounts, a waiver or simply exempting doesn't change the cost structure to either Spectrum or the state. And then, so those are the first 3 options. You'll see that 5C is highlighted. That's going to be my recommended option. I'm going to try to give you the logic why we landed on 5C. Basically, at a high level, 5C is the cheapest option for the state that doesn't create a double standard, and where Spectrum would expand, where it's pretty clear that they would expand. Okay, so 4 here would be to essentially do number 3, but then add 1 WPU per student in expansion campuses starting in 28. That has all of the uncertainty of number 3, and it adds costs. And if you're going to be adding formula or adding WPUs, that gets into a really dicey territory, especially on a permanent basis, doing that in rule, which is why 4 and beyond, I'd recommend that you work exclusively in statute in that regard. But, the same problems that exist with 3 exist with 4, essentially, on the uncertainty and the double standard. So 5A through D here, these are all the same recommendation. It's just the level at which you award WPUs across the entire LEA and or school, depending on how you want to handle it formulaically. So if you reduced all of Spectrum's WPUs down to 1.5, and that would increase those from 1 to 1.5 in the SPED add-on, or you added 0.5 to the schools that have, I have this, how do I move? Okay, I need to move the audio thing so I can actually click over here. Where is it? Okay, so I included in the backup the list of schools that were, larger than at least 10 students that had a high percentage of special education students above the 70%. And you can see Spectrum Academy are the two largest schools there. All of the other schools are within school districts. And so we, according to the rule and statute right now, since you fund and base everything at the LEA level, these schools would have to be converted to charter schools to access the SPED add-on formula if this new provision was added in place, essentially notwithstanding the formula and saying instead of the regular SPED add-on formula, you get X number of WPUs per ADM. Or if you added an additional formula on top of that, that's where that would and that would apply only to the high percentage SPED schools, these schools that we're talking about here, right here. So I know it's confusing. The math is essentially the same, except we're assuming that 100% of those schools would convert to charters in that scenario, which is very unlikely. So I know there's a lot going here. We're trying to consolidate a lot in one document here. But yeah, 5C is the first place as you ramp up that amount where Spectrum would expand. And if you can ask Courtney about 5B, from what I've heard, that option is likely not attainable for them either to expand. And then I want to include 5D, not that it's likely at all that you would go down that route, but I did want you to see essentially what it would cost or what the money would be for Spectrum if their St. George kids receive the same funding that their other kids receive right now. That's $2.5 million. So even though there's a net increase on their SPED funding in 5C, they're also adding 250 plus kids. And so they're receiving slightly less for their other students. So, they would still have to make their budget stretch a little further under 5C than they currently are. And then 6A and B here, this is a different approach. This goes back to this conversation over here. When we're having general conversations about which parts of the special education formula covers cost versus not. We're often talking about these self-contained students who tend to have, if they have more minutes of instruction, they tend to have higher cost services. To change the formula to add additional WPUs. So essentially 6A would be to change this 1 WPU for the student on the right-hand side to 2 WPUs. B would be to change it to 2.5 WPUs. Why is that negative for Spectrum? Is because Spectrum's self-contained prevalence rate is only 28% right now. And that, we in conversations with Spectrum, they provide general services that would likely be categorized as special education services in a normal district environment. So that number, that percentage could go up, but we just don't know what that is. I ran the numbers at 100%, which is not likely, but just so you could compare, where if 100% of their kids were self-contained students, there'd be a net cost of 800,000. And then for 6A and 6B would be 3.1 million. So that's a lot. I know I threw it at you all at once. I also wanted you to see here, I rank ordered those same things in order of fiscal impact of Spectrum from the largest declines to the largest increases. So you can kind of see, if I were in Spectrum's shoes, I'd love 5D. 5D would be great. And 4 might be nice, except, there are policy concerns that maybe Spectrum isn't thinking about, but you as policymakers have to. And then on the state side here, I did the same thing, but rank ordered for state fiscal impact here. And so obviously if you're adding self-contained WPUs for all 12,000 students across the state in that category, you're adding a lot of cost to the formula. In general, as you look through, 5C just seems to be the most prudent option, which is why that's what I'm recommending. But if you want to go down that route, definitely I'd recommend that you try to achieve that with the legislature in statute and the budget rather than just trying to change it in rule. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, Chair.
Thank you. I have some thoughts, but I'm going to look for committee member hands first. I'm not seeing any yet. And members, again, I'm scrolling and trying to see my full screen too. So if I miss you, member Booth, go ahead.
Dale, I just want to thank you for going through that very complex exercise. I mean, the amount of information that you have synthesized and thought through and presented in rank order is kind of mind-blowing to me, but I'm grateful for the opportunity to see what has been what you have considered and what others out there with great interest in this particular area may have considered or thought about. And I also appreciate the 5C recommendation. So thank you for that work, and I'm looking forward to trying to move this on to the full board.
Thank you. Vice Chair Kelly?
Yeah, I'll ditto what Board Member Booth said, but I wanted to add, I feel like Spectrum is, for me, a model of what charter schools should look like. I mean, they have a very specific charter in terms of what they're trying to achieve, what they're trying to accomplish, and so, I think, looking for ways to make sure that they can continue to expand and looking for ways that they can service some of our students that have specific needs, I think is important for us to do as a board. And so I appreciate Dale and the work that he's done on this.
Thank you. Chair Hymas?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just briefly, I'm going to just let you know I am going to abstain from this vote. I just wanted to throw that out there so that when we get into voting, you're not searching for something, and we can talk offline. But I appreciate the work that has been done here. I do appreciate what Spectrum does as well, but I will be abstaining from this one if that's okay.
Sure. I'm not seeing other hands right now from committee members. I'd just like to share a little bit of background about kind of how we got to this point. If members will remember, can we get that back up on the screen, Dale?
I apologize, Chair. Okay.
Okay. I was just thinking we may not be done with it entirely yet. Thanks so much. So just to give a quick recap, we had this kind of true up formula issue. We exempted everybody for a year so they would continue that additional funding. Then we thought, okay, now how are we going to work our way out of this? So then Spectrum was kind of an anomaly. We set them aside and thought we're going to work on this later while we worked on the other schools, and we set what we felt like in communication with them was a reasonable phase out plan for this true up formula to take effect. And then now we're at this third step, which is figuring what do we do long term about Spectrum Academy. What we have done essentially, if nothing changes, is that these additional funds will continue in perpetuity for the campuses that currently exist for Spectrum. What doesn't continue in perpetuity is that additional funding for schools that expand or expansion schools, so that funding would be reduced. So they came to us and said, we can't expand because we're functioning with this extra funding now, and we don't feel like there are ways to reduce even further considering the population that we're serving and the things that we're trying to accomplish here. So we got together and met. I gratefully was invited to a meeting at Spectrum with some of their parents, board members, and administrators, and also two people from, thank you, Dale and Winona from our finance team came to help us think through the financial logistics, and Representative Stephen White, who works on the public education appropriations, came to kind of put our heads together. And it was suggested by Royce Van Tassel that we also gather input from district schools. So there is input that says Spectrum is helpful, as Vice Chair Kelly said, to some of our districts. And Matt's not voting in this, but I know in our last meeting, he mentioned that it's kind of tough because he's got students that are just as expensive and doesn't have a Spectrum Academy close to his school. Similarly, when I spoke with the superintendent, he said, what we need ultimately is what you see at the bottom of your screen. If you could scroll down to the bottom, he said, because we have students that are equally difficult that transfer in and out from Spectrum, and we have small group classrooms all across our district. This particular superintendent said we're subsidizing by 2.5 million. Another district, a little larger, said to me they're using 4 million from their general ed students funds to help subsidize what's happening in these small group classrooms. Personally, I think it's a huge leap. I know we have discussed on the board getting to a place like a 6A or a 6B, even preferably. But we had historically too much carry forward in our special ed allowable by board rule. We allowed 20% because expensive students can move in and the districts left, okay, we've got to cover this. So the legislature said, we don't need to fund special education anymore because you have all this carry forward. So we as a board did a 3-year phase out plan of that, and we have consistently lowered down the amount of carry forward funds that have been able to be held by districts and charters. So now we have this more limited, reasonable amount of carry forward. We took care of that situation. Then at the same time, we had this intensive services fund for students with very high needs, but the formula was inequitable and it ended up into certain pockets where other students equally in need of those supports weren't receiving that fund. So we got rid of the intensive services fund. Step 2, we were ready to step 3, going down to even seek, is 6A or 6B a possibility? And we've got some coding issues and some, if we use general fund for special ed, do we have to code it as special ed? Because then we have maintenance of effort, federal restriction laws. That's an issue that needs to be discussed and worked out as well. But until we get to a point where we can really tackle a 6A and a 6B, the group that we spoke with, that I mentioned, the people who were in attendance before, and you all correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like that group felt like 5C would be at least a step toward that, because what it would do is for our LEAs that have schools that have more than 70% IEPs, and let's be real, Spectrum Academy has 85% of their students are on IEPs. So it's a massive undertaking. We also have special schools like a Kari Sue or a Dan Peterson that have 100% students also, that are there on IEPs, but they're not just this $9,700 cost. I mean, some of them have full-time nurses and tracheotomies, and they're, tens of thousands of dollars cost. So 5C, I think it was, is at least a step with some extra funding for those schools that have high amounts of IEPs and very expensive students. And that was a long explanation, but I hope that background from start to finish was a little bit helpful. Vice Chair Kelly.
Yeah, I'm looking at potentially a motion for this, but part of what I'm hearing Sam, or not, sorry, Sam, but Dale say is that 5C would need legislative change. Is there a motion that we should put forward from the board moving forward, or do we need this to go back to the legislature?
Dale, you can answer that question, but for 5C to happen, we need to go, the motion needs to be that the board will seek a legislative formula change. So it would be the second part of that right-hand box in the blue. So it would be that
So Dale, the motion would be what's in blue there.
So
second part.
yeah, Chair, and we don't have to be as I wrote that very specifically so I could know how to do the math. But you know, and there's a policy decision that doesn't have to be made today, whether you change the SPED add-on formula, which would require these schools to be converted charters, which is a whole nother thing, or just add additional formula on top of that. So we could keep that pretty general. But yeah, something along the lines to, you know, seek a legislative change to, you know, amend the SPED add-on formulas to provide additional WPUs with LEAs with more than 70% SPED ADM or something like that.
Or schools
Or
LEAs
schools or LEAs, yeah.
with more than 70%.
Yeah. Or I don't know how general we can be. I'll defer to others. Can it simply be to, you know, operationalize to the board a motion that's 5C? We could figure out how to word that in the next month.
I think we may need it specifically, but Cole, I can make a motion and then you can amend it. Or do you have one that you want to make?
No, I was trying to figure out what motion we should be making in reference to 5C. So yeah.
And I'm gonna do this a little bit on the fly too. I should have written something down beforehand, but I am going to move that the committee recommend to the
I
board.
didn't get my hand up. I'm sorry, Chair Davis. May I interrupt?
Yes. Do you want to speak to the motion after I make it, or do
No, I
you?
just have a question before you make your motion.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm wondering if the motion shouldn't be directing staff to work with a legislator. That the committee recommends that staff and that we make a legislative request change in this motion as it moves forward. And maybe that's what you were thinking as well.
Yes.
But I think that engaging that process just while we're doing it so that when it comes up, we're all on the same page as we talk about it in full board could prove fruitful. And then it's also categorized correctly for the agenda so that we're not caught in what's appropriate at what time and all the hoopla that people will bring up then.
Yes.
So cool. Thank you. That's my only comment. And I apologize for interrupting. You're on the fly.
I think we're thinking along the same lines, but you can correct me if I say this differently than what you're thinking.
Chair,
If it's okay, I'm going to stop sharing so that Cami can share and we can see the motion, if that works for you.
Okay, thank you. I've got motion language ready, but Chair Hymas, go ahead.
yeah, I am led to understand that a bill file may be open already, but I don't know if staff has heard that.
I know that someone was I don't know if that was Representative White after that meeting was considering that or not, but I have not heard that one is open.
That's what I understand. Now, I don't know if your motion would, I mean, he's not going to cancel that or anything. If there's one open, staff could still do it, but I've been made aware by a somewhat credible source, so I thought I'd let you know.
Okay, Director Nui or Deputy Nui.
I was just going to say quickly that one benefit of having a formal funding request or a policy request would be that the board can then use that in their in your priorities. So that can be on the list for priorities regardless of whether or not it's open. But
Yeah.
just
Yes.
So Chair, just one, and I don't know if you're working on a motion that's different than what Cami was writing up there. My only suggestion would be that we say or schools after LEAs.
Yes. Or I would say for LEAs with schools that have, or for schools, for LEAs for schools with more than 70% SPED ADM. Now, ultimately that would get to a, I guess they could have the choice, but they could look at like a 2.5 total WPU or just an additional line item similar to what they do with like a USDB. I don't know if we want to get as specific as to how that funding would look.
I would recommend, Chair Davis, that whoever the legislator is, and I believe Chair White did express willingness to open a bill file. I didn't know if a bill file had been opened, but to have it to have a bill file both or provide the option. Do you amend the SPED add-on formula? And these are the ways you could do it. Do you have an additional formula in addition to the SPED add-on formula? Both of those are different approaches that, and then the numbers would align with 5C, is how I'm hearing the conversation.
Do we need to write with numbers aligned to 5C? Because I don't want to align with making everybody turn all of their special needs schools into charter schools. That feedback I received on superintendents was
Okay.
that was not going to happen.
Okay, so then that's very helpful to amend. So because the SPED add-on formula is a very specific formula, so we could say I would just change it to the special education formulas plural. So that because
Take out
that would,
aligned to 5C.
with numbers aligned to 5C, that's good because then it's clear we're not talking about 5A, B, or D.
Yes, but the problem is the current SPED add-on formulas only go up to 2 total, not 2.5, which is what we're asking for.
The current SPED add-on formula is 1. That's what we're talking about. Self-contained is a separate formula. And so we're talking about going from 1 to 2.5 for these specialized schools in the SPED add-on formula. And I know this gets very technical, I apologize. So that's why it would be better to say amend the special education formulas broader for
Without
LEA.
add-on?
Yeah, rather than the SPED add-on formula.
Take off the words add-on.
The SPED formulas, yeah, if you could take that out. Yes, I think that gives us enough flexibility to do. And so that would, the way I would interpret that, just to be clear, is that this would not be to change the SPED add-on formula, but to seek an additional formula that would provide, 1.5 WPUs to all schools with SPED ADM above 70%.
Then I think we need to say, instead of amend, we need to say seek an additional formula.
Okay.
We need to say seek a legislative change to create an additional SPED formula.
That would be clearer, yes.
And I think instead of saying with numbers aligned to 5C, we're ultimately seeking are we ultimately seeking a 2.5, or do we want to leave it broad so they can do either a line item or a per student formula?
If it's all of these special education formulas are per student and probably would be that way. So if the committee feels comfortable enough with the numbers in 1.5, I would say then seek a legislative change to create an additional SPED formula to add 1.5 WPUs. So I'm going to share again so that Cami can see the language again.
But the original one isn't going to go to the LEA's general like a resource student. The whole 2.5 total would go to this school, right?
So the funding isn't school-based across any of these formulas.
Right.
You can say, we can talk about allowable uses of the funds. But this additional one would be if you have any special education student that attends a Corey Sue or a Spectrum or any of these would essentially generate additional 1.5 WPUs. That's what we're talking about.
In addition to the first.
In addition to the one. And that's why it's 1.5 and not 2.5.
Okay.
To create an additional SPED formula to add 1.5 WPUs per SPED ADM per SPED ADM, so per full-time special education student for LEAs for schools with more than 70% SPED ADM. And then, yeah, you can strike with numbers aligned to 5C.
So
and then to add an additional, yeah, I believe that does what 5C says.
Yep, I think so too. We typically don't wordsmith on the fly like that. Wow, thanks for your patience, everybody. And Dale, thank you for helping. And Cami, you're an amazing driver. Thanks for following us. Chair Hymas, go ahead.
Thank you. I know I'm recusing. I've already, abstaining. I've already mentioned that. I want to be careful about locking ourselves in too early. So just keep that in mind as you're going through this. I'm not sure. I mean, we sounded pretty specific. Dale did a great job. He knows what he's talking about. But this is a process. I just don't know what happens if we're locked in and it doesn't work out, or if we need to make adjustments. Just again, I've got lots of concerns, but thank you for your patience, Chair.
Might I seek clarification? This is the month that we typically start with our request for funding from the legislature conversations. Are you concerned about timing, or are you concerned about putting a specific amount in and not leaving that open for more debate later? What are your specific concerns?
My concerns are, do we have yeah, there's a couple things. It's fairness, one, across all schools. And then two, funding is always a concern. When the legislature says one thing and we push for another, that's always a concern. And I just want to make sure that when we approach this, we have some flexibility as we move forward. Right. And of course we can, right? This is just going to full board. I understand that, but I just want to be mindful that things change all the time, and that we have, I know we're talking about Spectrum here, but there are 160 LEAs out there that are saying similar things.
Yeah, and we've heard this from both the charters and the districts, and so we hear you loud and clearly, and that gets more to a bottom of the chart type of ultimate situation, which I think, at least personally, that would be my goal. It's been my goal for 7 years. If y'all can get it accomplished, great. We've been trying to pull these barriers out, but they all take phase-in time and years. And so I hear your concern loud and clear. I'm comfortable moving forward with this right now. I understand all the things that you said, and those are all true too. Other hands at this point? If not, I'm going to go ahead and reread this motion.
Chair, could
Or at least I'm going to read it in the first place.
Chair,
Yes.
could I request just a small, since we're already saying an additional at the beginning, SPED formula, I don't think we have to say an additional 1.5 WPUs again. Could we strike the second and additional?
Yes. Thank you, Dale, and thank you, Kemi. I move that the committee recommends that the board seek a legislative change to create an additional special ed formula to add 1.5 WPUs per SPED ADM for LEAs for schools with more than 70% special ed ADM. Those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? That passes with member Hymas abstain. It seems like a heavy lift. Let's see where we're at on our time. Okay, we'll take a break in about 15 minutes. Let's move on to thanks to everybody who's been involved. And I know there were folks from Spectrum Academy that were here as well. Thank you for being willing to answer questions, should we have had any. Let's move on to 1.7, action decision regarding property tax working group. Dale, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, this one is me too. If Cami, can I share again? Am I available? Okay, great. Thank you. So let me full screen this. Okay. Similar to the last one, I tried to put a lot of information to a single table due to time. We talked, we went through, a presentation on what the changes in the 2026 general session were that related to property taxes. I tried to, on the left-hand side, articulate the concerns to cover that a property tax working group possibly could cover, and then what was covered in the 26th session. Now, I didn't cover everything related to property taxes that I've heard as a concern over the last year. A lot of the broader concerns about, are property taxes too high, or have they increased too quickly? Or is the property tax burden fair across residential versus commercial, and all of those kind of conversations? Those quickly get us out of USBE's lane, and some of this is somewhat out of USBE's lane as it is. So, those are some of the considerations when I tried to put in concerns to cover. So if you don't see something, that was the thought process. I'm not trying to steer something one way or another by including something or not including something. Just trying to be transparent with my thought process here as we try to figure out, your preferred method going forward as policymakers. So the first concern to cover was around transparency and timing in the truth in taxation process. House Bill 236 addressed a lot of that. And I can go into more detail. I did last month on that. There were concerns about whether entities are actually following the requirements of the truth in taxation. And Senate Bill 238 required a timeline and evidence for that. So those were two bills that passed this last session. The next two rows have to do with the state guarantee, the voting board local levy program. One is that length of the hold harmless period, basically for how many years does a school district get credit for the rates that they get set on their increments levied. If you remember, they can get guaranteed up to 20 increments. The old formula was up to 6 years. The formula that was replaced for this year in 2025 for the 26 year was 2 years. So essentially you could get your rate set last year and the current year, and then House Bill 300 pushed that back to 3 years. So there was a lot of conversation on what's the right, hold harmless period. What wasn't discussed in more detail, at least that I could find evidence of in the bills, was whether 20 increments was the proper number of increments to guarantee, whether that should be more or less. And then there were concerns regarding transparency of PTIFs balances, as well as other funding balance questions and cash reserves and those things. No bills were passed in this last session on that issue specifically, but over the previous 2 sessions, there were important bills that provided greater transparency on that. And I provided links to those in the document. So hopefully that gives you kind of the lay of the land about, in a succinct way, about some of the concerns that I heard that relate more to USBE's lane when it comes to property taxes and what has been done in the legislature over the last few years. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Member Bogus.
Thank you. Director Frost, can you tell me what board members requested that this working group be disbanded?
Say again, sorry.
I'm just wondering what board members requested this. The agenda memo says it was requested by 3 or more board members. I would just like to know who they are.
Well, I can tell you I was one of them. It just made sense coming out of legislation. And the person who requested the agenda item in the full board called me and said, look, my concerns were addressed in the legislative session. And so she said she was okay with pulling this off as well.
Okay, thank you.
But let's be clear though, I don't know why it said 3 or more members, because 3 or more members don't necessarily need to revisit, and we can take no action if you want it. The committee wants the working group to continue. I think it just made sense seeing what the legislative body did during legislation to not recreate the work that they just did.
Okay, thank you.
Really where it stemmed. And I thought that I remembered someone proposing a bill to look at the cap numbers, but I don't know who it was. I can't even remember who that sponsor was. So there's no detail written here about that, but the others certainly had pretty specific details. And when I talked to Representative Peterson, who did a lot of work on this, was told that several stakeholders were involved in these decisions. And so it mirrored what we would do in a working group. So that's just where we were. Chair Hymas.
Yeah, so we're not looking for a motion on this, right? This is just kind of information.
Well, personally, I think that we should recommend that the board suspend the property tax working group created. I'm going to make a motion. I move that the committee recommends that the board suspend the property tax working group created by board motion November 6th, 2025.
Aye. That's me voting.
That's you voting. But I also have another potential motion, and I don't know if it goes to this area. And again, procedural experts can tell me if I'm out of line doing this here or need to request this at the end of the meeting. But I would like our staff to study and gather feedback about the pros and cons of aligning the calendars. And I think Dale would explain this better than I would because he's got a tax mind. But there's a disconnect in the timing of calendars, and this was not addressed in legislation. And it results sometimes in discrepancy between what the county understands as the right amount of money and what the district understands as the right amount of money, therefore impacting both district and charters. This just happened recently. I won't say exactly what county it was in, but one thought it was 3 million, the other thought it was 3.2. There was this $200,000 disparate question that wouldn't need to go through the motions of being reconciled if the calendars came at the same time. And Dale, can you, first of all, is this appropriate to this agenda item? And if so, then Dale, can you explain that a little bit?
So Chair, whether or not there's a working group, we're happy to come and present on any of the work that we do related to property taxes. So just for information for committee members, this wasn't brought up as a concern, but it certainly impacts me and my team. So the practice is, and it's in statute in a couple random places, that the actual effective calendar year for property taxes. So if you remember the state offsets, so the basic levy is issued. If you're Alpine School District, we think you're going to bring in $80 million from the basic levy. If you bring in $85 million in the basic levy, then your state aid payments go down by $5 million for your WPUs. That's one of the pieces. The other piece has to do with the voted and board formula. When we actually true up to actual collections, it's not based on fiscal year, so July through June. It's not based on calendar year. And the tax commission, their data is based on calendar year. It's based on April through March. And I believe the practice is done that way so that the collections data can be as current as possible while still truing up before the end of the year. But what that requires us to do is this really antiquated process to reach out to every county treasurer, get them to fill out a spreadsheet, get the districts to verify the spreadsheet, and to mediate any differences, to Chair Davis's point. And my poor colleague Winona had the duty of doing that this year, and she did a great job. But it's definitely an administrative burden for us at the USBE level and for counties, and it's somewhat of an administrative burden for districts. And then it does create, a possibility of discrepancies and doesn't align to the audited numbers that are based on calendar year from the school district. The challenge is if you change that, either the districts or the state basically have to front load those costs for 3 months or 9 months, depending on which calendar you go. I would recommend align to the property tax calendar because that's already audited end of year reports that they have to deal with. This doesn't relate directly to the property tax working group. Nobody's brought up the calendar issue. We can certainly talk about that as a possible policy request, or it might even be a one-time budget request, depending on how it's structured. So it's certainly related because it deals with USBE and property taxes, but it's not directly related to the working group. Does that help to provide a little more information to your point, Chair Davis?
Yes, and I think that I would like to make that a separate and second motion, that come back as an information item or even potentially an action item next month. If nobody's stopping me procedurally, all the parliamentarians out there. So let's go ahead and deal with this motion first, and then I think I'll make that motion next. So I move that the committee, well, first of all, is there any discussion to this motion that I already put up here on the board? I'm not seeing any additional questions or comments. So I move that the committee recommends that the board suspend the property tax working group created by board motion November 6, 2025. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
That passes with Vice Chair Kelly opposed. And then I'd like to make another motion in this property tax space, that the committee asks staff to bring back information and feedback from the field on the potential of aligning tax calendars. Did I say that right, Dale?
Yeah, I'd probably say aligning school district tax collection calendars with the tax commission calendars. Yeah.
Thank you. I move that the committee asks staff to bring back information and feedback from the field on the potential of aligning school district tax collection calendars with the tax commission calendars. Any discussion to the motion? Those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. It's 10:02. So let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break. Appreciate your patience and work, committee and staff and members that are participating from the public. Thank you. We'll give it 1 minute for people to trickle back in. We've had our 5 minutes, but I know sometimes takes a minute to get back and get up and running.
Chair, I am back, but I'm going to go listen in law and licensing for half a second, and then I'll turn my camera back on to let you know that. So I'm listening. I'll truly be back in just a few minutes.
Are you okay if we start without you, or would you like us to wait?
I would prefer it. Thank you.
Okay. We will do so then. Thank you. Do we have our other members back by chance? Thanks, Randy. We'll just wait for one more. They're either Cole or Christina to make sure we have a majority since Member Hymas has to step away. Oh, Member Bogus is here. Thank you, Member Bogus. Okay, let's go ahead and get started then. So we are on agenda item 1.8, R277-625 Mental Health Screeners Amendment. And we have policy analyst Greg Connell and
Michelle
threat and
Tony
crisis response support specialist Michelle Knight and school-based mental health specialist Tara K. Bodley. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Davis. R277-625, this rule's coming to the committee because of legislative action that removed some state code, and we are now aligning our rule to meet the new state code that was enacted this last legislation. You'll also notice that we are also removing the oversight category, since this is the first time this rule has come to us since we changed that rule. And so the things that changed are in the bottom in R277-625-5 on the procedures and criteria for awarding the grants, and we are reflecting the new changes to statute in 1 and 2, and then below 2 in the A through E, we are reenacting some old code to give better direction on how we plan to carry that out. And if you have any questions, we have Michelle Knight and Tara Kay with us to answer any questions.
Okay. I'm looking for hands. I don't see any. So I'm seeking a motion. Members?
Chair, I move that the committee approves R277-625 Mental Health Screeners Draft 2 on first reading and forwards to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor that the committee approves R277-625 Mental Health Screeners Draft 2 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Any discussion to the motion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? That passes with Member Hymas absent and perhaps Member Kelly. Are you here? Well, let's say Member Hymas and Member Kelly absent.
Sorry, I just got back. I was absent, so go ahead.
That's okay. We'll
Chair
put
Davis.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I just couldn't get my unmute button fixed. I'm a no on this.
Okay, then that does not pass unless we want to review the issue one more time and see if either Matt or Cole can vote. Greg, will you quickly review what the change is again in
Yeah,
this rule?
thanks. Sorry.
Yes, I can do that. No worries. So the reason why we're changing this rule is because state code has changed. And so you'll notice in R277625-5, the old rule used to have some requirements for distributing 90% and distributing the remaining 10%. That has since been removed by code. So we are removing that to match code. The new language in 1 is what matches code. And then in 2, underneath section 5, that is old language from the code prior that we've reenacted to try and give guidance on how the state plans to now enact this code. And then we removed the oversight category from the top.
Thank you. Vice Chair Kelly, do you have any questions for them about that?
No.
Okay, well, let's try to vote one more time and just see where we land if it goes or not. Member Booth, do you want to make that motion again?
You bet. I move that the committee approves R277-625 mental health screeners draft 2 on first reading and forwards to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Thank you. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And those opposed?
No.
Okay, that passes with Member Bogus opposed and Member Hymas absent. Let's move on to 1.9, College and Career Awareness Repeal. Say that 5 times fast. And it looks like we have Deputy Superintendent Elise Nui.
Okay, yes, you do. Apologies, that took me a second. So we have 916 coming to you. There were some changes in legislation this last year that impacted the college and career awareness. So this is the one that's in middle school, related to CTE and college and career readiness. So we have repealed the parts of the rule that are no longer relevant due to legislation, and there was very little left after we took that part out. So what we decided to do was take the remaining parts and put them into Rule 911, which you will see in just a second, that was also needing to be updated. And so we decided to just go ahead and repeal all of 916. We took out the parts that were no longer legislatively required and moved the parts that still are relevant to 911. That's what we have here.
Yeah, that was
I'd be
pretty
happy
fast.
to make a motion.
Okay, I just want people to know that all that stuff that looks like it's gone is actually moved over to that 911 rule. So go ahead, Member Booth.
I move that the committee repeal R277-916 College and Career Awareness on first reading and recommend the board repeal the rule on second and final reading.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor that the committee repeal R277-916 College and Career Awareness on first reading and recommend the board repeal the rule on second and final reading. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That passes unanimously with Chair Hymas absent. Okay, great. Thank you. We have item 1.10, action R277-911, secondary career and technical education amendment. And we have Deputy Superintendent Nui again and CTE Coordinator Wendy Morton. And up above, I just want to apologize if I missed announcing on the mental health screeners. I just want to say these names right. We had Threat and Crisis Response Support Specialist Michelle Knight, and we had School-Based Mental Health Specialist Tara K. Bodley. And if I messed any of that up before, I apologize. So now we're down to 1.10, and we have, again, Deputy Superintendent Nui and CTE Coordinator Wendy Morton. And go ahead and fill us in, one of you, whomever was planning on it.
Right. I will do a quick overview and then Wendy fill us in with the important details. So there are two major changes going on with 9/11. The first is, as I mentioned before, moving some of those items from 9/16 into 9/11, where they will now live happily in the CTE funding rule. The second thing, though, I want to make sure we understand was that in legislation this year, there were some changes to code in how we fund CTE programs. So in our rule, we have several tiers of CTE funding, but they really fall into kind of two sections. One is for high schools that have CTE programming, and they can apply for additional funding for that programming. And then we have a tier of funding, which is for CTE centers. And these are typically historically, they have been areas where a LEA will create a center where students can attend during the day and then return to their home high school, either at the end of the day or for graduation purposes. It's not a functioning high school in the way that it gives out diplomas. And so those had a different kind of funding structure. But since the creation of this rule, we've seen some changes in the way that CTE is run throughout the state. And so the legislature changed the code so that comprehensive high schools, as they named them in the code, can also qualify for the CTE center funding if they meet certain criteria. So the purpose of this rule is to outline when could a comprehensive high school meet the criteria for receiving the kind of funding that CTE centers get. So you'll see a couple of important changes. The first is defining what a comprehensive high school is, because that's not a term we were necessarily using in our rules. So you'll see that on line 53, this is any high school that provides the regular array of high school activities and options from which a student can graduate. So that's the important piece there. This definition was added from 9/16. And then you'll see a definition for school district technical center, which already existed. We added the second portion, though, that says that it may include a comprehensive high school if that comprehensive high school is serving as a hub, a CTE center hub, for a minimum of 3 schools, which could be itself plus 2 other schools or 3 schools total. And so this really is trying to mirror the requirement that CTE centers serve a large a population of students from more than just one location. So they're coming from other areas to get that CTE programming. So then you'll see in, I believe it's section 5. Nope. So section 5 is for the WPs for school districts that have CTE programming. And then the section below is the school district technical center. So here we have taken out the parts that code requires us to take out, because part of the change in code was that USBE can no longer dictate what the administrative function or structure of a CTE center looks like. So we took out those requirements to align with code, and then made sure that a comprehensive high school can fit under this under certain circumstances. So that was a lot of changes. Wendy, what did I miss?
The only other thing is at the very bottom, there's a section where the change for comprehensive guidance, there was a reference to their rule and the funding allocation. And because that's completely separate now, that has been updated as well. And so the only one, so the college and career awareness, which you mentioned, was added, and then the school counseling reference was removed because of that being separated in funding for FY27.
If there's any questions.
I am not seeing any. I will entertain a motion if someone has one.
I'm happy to, Chair.
Thank you, Member Booth.
I move that the committee approve R277-911, Secondary Career and Technical Education, Draft 1, on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor as stated. Any discussion to the motion? Okay, so again, we have a motion on the floor that the committee approve R277-911 Secondary Career and Technical Education Draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed?
No.
That passes with Member Bogus opposed. Okay, thank you. We're on item 1.11.
Chair, can I clarify? I think I heard Chair Highness that time. Did I hear him?
You
Yes,
did hear me, and I did say yes.
he is
Perfect.
back.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome back. Welcome back from law and licensing to greener pasture. No, I'm just kidding. They're all green pastures. We're just a little biased over here in our own committee. I'm sure they are too for theirs.
Ours is greener because we have more money.
Oh, yeah, literally greener. That was very good. So let's go ahead and talk about school fees. And we have Deputy Superintendent Newey and Fiscal Monitor Scott Crapo.
Thank you so much, Chair. So 407, we seem to see at this time every year because there are small changes made during the legislative session. So the changes made this year came from Representative Welton's bill, in which he requires two things now in statute. So one is that LEAs put a cap on school fee waivers. The second is that students should only be allowed to take one out-of-state trip on a school fee waiver without question. The second trip they can take if they create an action plan with their school administrators on how they're going to give back to the community. And that can be decided. What that means and what that looks like is based on the school conversation. So we wanted to include those in this rule. You will see we have a definition for action plan that comes out of code. So this is what it would look like, the basic minimum requirements for this action plan. And then you'll also see, I think, where it went. Right here. So trip was defined pretty narrowly in statute as to what this out-of-state trip looks like. So I want to be really clear about this. It's a school-sponsored travel activity of 2 or more nights out that requires a student to pay a fee for participation. So things that would not count would be things like interstate sports travel, right? Where you're on a sports team and you're just competing with someone at the north of the state, right? That does not count. Additionally, if an LEA is choosing to pay for everyone's trip, then that would not require a fee waiver and would not fall under this because it is being covered by the LEA. So there are some things that would not fall under this. The trip has to fall under this definition. And then you'll see below, we have some details about what that looks like. And then we also wanted to clarify, it was not super clear in the code itself when it said a cap on fee waivers. In consultation with all of the superintendents and all of our stakeholders, we are interpreting this to mean that it should be a dollar cap amount per student per year. So we're not asking an LEA to establish an overall cap for their whole LEA for a year, but this is rather what is a cap for a student for a given school year. So those are the changes that you'll see in 407. If you have any questions, we're happy to take them. And Scott Crapo, if I missed anything, please let me know.
The cap is to how many fees a student can have waived? Is that what the cap is? A student who qualifies for a fee waiver?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it is a dollar amount. So it is a total dollar amount in which they can have. So it's not the number of fees. Like if I have like $25 fees waived as opposed to one $100 fee waived, right? It's the dollar amount.
Are there any federal laws that surround fee waivers? Or only state?
I do not know of any federal. I saw Scott come off mute though. Maybe he knows.
No, it's just state.
Interesting. I'm not seeing Chair Hymas.
Yeah, to piggyback off of your question, Cindy, a little bit is, so the LEA gets to set the dollar amount. So an LEA could say, look, we'll waive fees up to $500, but anything above that, right? And I get that the LEA would need to, it would need to provide a free and appropriate education, right? That fee waiver, that's kind of your restriction. You can't just say, yeah, our fee waiver is, our cap is $30, right? And our registration fees are $35. So, you eliminate, so there's rules in place, but it's different for every LEA, which I could see the purpose of that. I'm just wondering if this is, well, no, I'm just talking out loud, I guess. I'm just trying to understand. So Elise, no questions, just me taking your time. I apologize. Chair, thank you.
Well, look, I have similar questions. This comes from code.
Correct. This comes from code. And I think to add a little bit, both to your question and what Your Highness was saying, is there are principles in our federal law and in constitutional law, right, that students are able to receive a free and appropriate education, right? And school fees kind of comes out of that doctrine and those set of ideas. And so, yes, while there are no specific school fee laws at the federal level, what we're trying to do with our state law is how does that fit into the overall idea or philosophy to make sure that students are able to access that free and appropriate education while still having some sort of mechanism to cap that in a way that's affordable and workable for schools. So that's kind of the tension that we're working with always.
See, I foresee this one coming back around to the legislature for some adjustments in the future. It could get a little tricky, especially with everyone making such different decisions, but
Yeah, Chair, if I could, that's from my thought as well. Some clarity would be fantastic here, because again, an LEA could say, look, we'll provide a free appropriate education, but you only get two
$5.
sports. Or well, you know what I mean? Like, okay, football costs, let's say 1,500. Wrestling, you wrestle under Cole, maybe it's 3,000. I don't know what his fees are.
It is big.
But do you know what I mean? Like, okay, so that's
And
I don't know. It is tricky. It's tricky.
I'm working through this in my mind as well. I don't know. It's.
I mean, could they say like you get $100 fee waiver? That almost takes out a ton of activities.
I do think you would have to, if that was directed to me. Sorry, Chair. I'm just jumping in.
Please do.
Who's driving that's going to Welton? Because that's good. I'm curious to see.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull up the actual code language so that you can see it, but it looks like it's that there was legislation last year as well that there needed to be a path to graduation that was free.
Right.
Right. And so presumably all LEAs have that in place now. So this fee waiver is kind of on top of that, that there has to be a basic path to graduation that is without requiring any fees whatsoever. And then this fee waiver would be on top of that. But I do agree that it's tricky. Right here. Yeah.
Limit
this is where
a
it's
waiver for a trip to no more than 2 trips per student per year. Adopt policies for a dollar amount cap on total fee waivers.
It's that line 40 that has potential to, because even on line 39, limit a waiver for a trip to no more than 2 trips per year. Could it be less than 2 trips? Could it be no trips? If does line 40 trump 39? If they say $100, then they don't pay for any of those. I'm personally, I'm fine with some limits. Give all kids have to have some limits unless their parents are millionaires, which most of them aren't. But having it be so seemingly unwieldy, I think could lead to a lot of unintended consequences. But that's just my opinion. And this is we're aligning our board rule to code. So
Yeah, and I agree, Cindy. I think limits are good as well. It's just hard to know where they are.
mhm.
Well,
And
this seems pretty vague, does it not? I mean, they're leaving it pretty much up to the LEAs.
I mean, we could suggest that the board requests more clarity in this code. We could pass our rule because we have to align it to what the law says, but we could with it request that the board request more clarity in this particular code, if that's something the committee would be interested in.
I think that would I would appreciate that. We could bring it to. I know law and licensing has their legislative. What I don't know, Elise, you know what it's called, legislative request or something in there, and we could just
Or can we
do
just
this as
recommend it to the full board and then have it in full board, or does it have to go to another committee before it goes to?
I would ask Scott, and he has his hand up actually, because Scott, can somebody, typically, if somebody does a funding request, it has to go through finance first. So what are your thoughts? I mean, it'll be on the agenda in full, or, well, I don't know if it'll
But
be on
this
the agenda.
policy does involve finance. I don't know. Deputy Jones?
Well, so just a couple of questions or concerns. I mean, I think the overarching concern when this first came through was, and maybe we've talked about this a little bit, is does this, I don't think you can put a cap on waivers because then it could violate the permanent injunction, right? So anyway, there's that. But yeah, but to the second part, or that Chair Hymas asked, that's generally the process is for it to come through, as a request that way. So does that help or?
But can it come through finance committee if it involves finance, or does it need to go back to law and licensing?
It's up to you. Either way, I don't think there's a.
But Scott, this is my question.
Sure.
If which trumps which thing? Because the permanent injunction says something different than this code, and this code says something different than the permanent injunction.
Well, I think that was the concern to begin with the legislation that changed the code is it violating the permanent injunction? But I don't think we ever really got an answer on that. So I think maybe, I don't know, maybe it's the days where today's the day where we need just more legal opinions and stuff on whether or not, because if we probably shouldn't be here in the first place if having to revise the rule if the code itself violates the permanent injunction. So
right,
perhaps this is another opportunity for a legal opinion, or I mean, Elise is an attorney, so but then I don't know from the policy perspective if that's a conflict or what have you, but we're conflicted here, I think, not personally, but with the permanent injunction versus what came out in the legislation, now trying to align the rule with it causes those second and third level effects or concerns there too. So anyway, it's, so then, but back to, how would this go? Law and licensing is fine because I think you'd probably want to try to do both in the same place, right? Is try to see if you could, we need to go back to the legislature and say, this doesn't look right, from the permanent injunction perspective, and then make your requests that way. Those types usually flow through law and licensing. So, for the law part of it. So that's part of what I'd recommend.
That we could add?
Yeah.
That's helpful. Is this something we could add to the motion, the language of the motion on this item? Could we add with a legal opinion to be shared in full board and potential request for clarity in code. And
Right.
then we can do a sub motion in the full board. Sorry, go ahead, Deputy Nui.
Apologize. We could do that as conjunction because I'm a little bit worried that if we wait for the opinion to start the legislative request, we'll be a little behind. So I think we should start the legislative request if that works for the board while we're getting the opinion.
Let's say with a legal opinion to be shared in full board and a request for clarity in code.
Love it.
Okay. I'll go ahead and make that unless there's someone that is willing or would like to make that motion.
I didn't get the last part. I got the legal opinion to be shared in full board and what?
And a request for clarity in code.
I'm willing to make the motion.
Thank
Cindy.
you. Thank you.
So I move that the committee continue and approve R277-407 school fees draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for continuation and approval on second and final reading with a legal opinion to be shared in full board and a request for clarity in code.
Thank you. There is a motion on the floor as stated. Members, any additional discussion to the motion? Okay, there is a motion on the floor that the committee continue and approve R277-407 school fees draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for continuation and approval on second and final reading with a legal opinion to be shared in full board and a request for clarity in code. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. And let's
ask for clarity, Chair. I apologize.
Yes, please.
So the expectation then for staff is we're going to start working on a legislative request to bring back to this committee in June, specifically for clarity surrounding this piece of statute, while going to the AAGs and asking for an opinion about the injunction and bringing that to the full board in June. Correct.
Yes, but I don't think it would hurt to wait until after full board to start working, or do you feel like that's too late to start working on with the sponsors clarifying code?
No, I think that's fine. We'll start working on the paperwork and we'll hold off until contacting sponsors until.
What committee, what do you think? Do you want them at least just to give a heads up to the sponsors that we're having this discussion and
to the sponsors of the bill, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
That could prove fruitful.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think we could just give them a heads up because realistically, we can't start working on changing code until the full board requests it anyway. So I think a heads up is fine that this happened, this conversation happened, and that we're going to be voting on that in full board. Thank you so much, everybody. 1.12, action R277-632, funding for at-risk students and students learning English amendment. We have, we are making Deputy Superintendent Nui earn her lunch today.
I'm so glad to
We're
be
not
with you.
even providing.
Who's buying it? Chair Davis, are you buying lunch today?
I was gonna say that was a bad cliche to use. Anyway, we also have Director of Data and Statistics, Aaron Bruff, with us. One of you can lead out, Deputy Nui, maybe?
I'll start there. And then we also have Dr. Strato with us as well on the students learning English side of the policy. So this, if you recall, a couple years ago, Representative Perucci passed a bill that would allow LEAs to access emergency funding if they experienced a rapid increase of students learning English in their LEA. We worked with the representative and drafters about a year and a half ago to draft that code, got it all perfect, and then came to the next school year and realized that no schools actually qualified under the formula that we had put together. So this is our revision to that formula, and that went into code, that went into, I believe, HB1. And now we are updating our rule to make sure that it matches and aligns with that code. So actually, the way that we had originally drafted this rule was broad enough that very little actually needed to be changed in rule. So while there was some significant changes in code, the only change that you'll see here in this rule is the removal of the reference to the WIDA assessment. We are no longer using the WIDA assessment as the trigger for a student qualifying for this calculation. Rather, it's now an immigrant status. So if a student has had interrupted formal education, then they qualify to be added to this calculation, and that can qualify an LEA. I will also add that in code, this is not explicit in our rule, but in code, it allows for an LEA to reach out to USBE and explain extenuating circumstances if they feel like they deserve this funding, but maybe don't exactly qualify under the calculation as it's laid out, that there is an exception kind of built into the code to allow LEAs to do that. So there is a lot more flexibility in this funding mechanism now, but the only change that you'll actually see is the stricken part in lines 49 and 50.
And who makes those decisions if those waivers are granted or not?
I will pass off to my peers if they know. Oh, Aaron Bruff is available. My understanding is that schools would reach out, that there is a kind of application process. The first part is that we alert schools if they qualify under the strict formula. We say, hey, we've calculated your numbers and you apply. If a school feels they don't get that alert and they still feel like they deserve the funding or that this funding would be helpful, they can then reach out to, I believe that's Aaron's team or Christelle's team, to say, we would like to do this, and then we jump into action. Is that correct, Aaron?
They can request it through Christelle Estrada first, and then the data and statistics team runs the information in October to see who qualifies at that time.
Members, do you have any questions for Dr. Estrada? Thanks, Director Bruff. I'm not seeing hands. I hope I haven't missed anyone. I'd like to know what do we have just a consistent criteria? That's what I care about, that the criteria, I know these will be anomalies, but will there still be some criteria as to how to determine which anomalies will qualify and which won't, or is this just new territory? Dr. Estrada, can you share some expertise with us?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I want to thank everybody who actually worked on this, especially Aaron. Aaron and I work with a group of people, and Elise. This was a real challenge because the intention was about newcomers. And so students with interrupted formal education is the way in which the Data and Statistics Department actually calculates funding for Title III. So I think that's the other question. The other question ends up being, if an LEA is showing financial need, and I think the way we talked about it in the previous work was, if they've waived Title III funds, but then they want funds from state funding, then the question is, how do they prove that they're in financial need and that they've actually used all the resources that are related to students with interrupted formal education? So I think we have a process that would really help, especially with Aaron's help and the data and statistics group, who've done a really wonderful job in changing the calculation to really support those LEAs who feel that they are in need of additional funding. I hope that answers your question, Chair Davis.
So just not to beat a dead horse, but what specifically would be like why would they need to say a student didn't have an interruption in funding and they're contacting us for with a special case. What would be an example of a special?
Well, that's the other thing that I think is interesting, especially since the previous calculation, and this is the piece that's really important, didn't really identify the students who actually needed additional support through funds because it was done by an assessment. And so if you look at enrollment, oftentimes students come at different times during the year. So the only thing that I can say that would help you understand the issue is that students would come in with, interrupted formal education, and when they're enrolled, they're actually identified specifically based on that they haven't had any other formal education. And that's the data that we use, and the data and statistics people have used for, well, ever since I've been here, so 15 years. So the goal really is the way in which data is during enrollment actually ends up being sent to USBE so we can do the calculation. I don't know if that answers your question, but really it's about interrupted formal education. Elise has her hand up too.
Right. That's how they qualify. My question was, and I appreciate that, more specific to the exceptions, Dr. Nui or Deputy Nui.
I'll say, and Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong. I think part of, to piggyback off what Dr. Estrada was saying, is that sometimes our very small districts don't qualify under the strict calculation, right? So they may not see a 40% exactly increase in students with this interrupted formal education, but they have a significant amount that, based on their small, operations of scale, does impact them greatly. So we have like South Severe, for example, may see an increase. So those are the kinds of exceptions we're hoping that they would reach out to us and say, we have 12 in one grade level. That doesn't hit our 40% cap, but this is the thing.
And then Dr. Estrada would make those determinations of who is accepted for the exception and who isn't.
Yeah, and then Aaron's team would look at statistically, is this still significant numbers wise? Does this meet the intent of the funding?
Thank you. Vice Chair Kelly.
So this bill was written 2 years ago, and if I heard right, nobody qualified, so there was no money used. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay, and so now this is there a budget? Is there a specific amount allocated to it?
So I can answer partly. Deputy Jones, correct me if I'm wrong, that there was a budget given at that time. So I believe it was $500,000 that came out with that original bill 2 years ago that was not used. But then this funding source is also an existing funding source that we use for emergency enrollment situations regardless. So it's kind of an existing plus some additional funds available. I see, Director.
Did the 500,000 roll over, and that is still available, and was there additional added to it?
Chair Davis, I can answer that one if
Thank you, Sam.
that's helpful. Sam, you're a school finance director. So initially there was $5 million one time in stabilization account money that was appropriated. The statute does allow USBE to allocate $500,000 from the at-risk add-on program, but typically that program does not have any additional funds to allocate towards this purpose. So what we have available right now is largely that $5 million one time, of which all $5 million is still remaining.
Okay.
To piggyback on that question, it wasn't that students didn't qualify because they didn't have a need. It was because of some formulaic provision in our board rule or something that precluded it actually being
or the
able.
legislation, not necessarily
It
board
was
rule.
in statute. That's
Was it
correct.
in statute? Oh, okay.
Right.
I had heard it was in our rules, so that's a good clarification. Okay, so they worked on that little formulaic switch or something, and now we're going to be able to use the funds for the students that need it.
Right. If I can provide just a small bit of extra clarity, there is still criteria in statute, but as Deputy Nui has done a great job of explaining, that criteria of 40% above the previous 3-year average or and 10 or more students. If you're a small LEA and that doesn't apply, so you can see here that the criteria is greatly reduced from 75% to 40% and 30 students down to 10 students. But even then, if your LEA is small or you're at 39% or whatever it may be, the USBE now has the authority to still distribute funds if they're
Go
needed.
back up to 200, I think it was, yeah. I'm curious, LEA, is it by LEA or is it by school? Because I'm thinking about Alpine School District and I'm saying, okay, if you were to compare Mountain View High School to say Lone Peak High School, Mountain View may qualify, but Lone Peak wouldn't. Is it strictly by LEA or is it a school thing?
It's school. It says on the, let's see.
That's what I was trying to see.
Yeah, on 203 it says at a school. Yeah,
LA
beginning of line
University
203.
State, but at a school within the LA. Oh,
Yeah.
there you go. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Yeah,
looking
good
for.
question. Thank you for those questions and thank you. And Dr. Estrada, you had your hand up earlier, but it's down now. Did I get what you needed?
Yeah, thanks, Chair Davis. I think Elise as well as Sam, we all worked on this for a very long time, and with lawyers and analysts from the state legislature, with a lot of support from everyone, because that money, that 5 million allocation, was not being distributed. And so we fixed the calculation. Aaron and I worked on it really hard, and we sent it out to Scott, and Sam, Aaron and I and Scott met. And so I think we have a way to really ensure that even rural districts that I know are doing really amazing work. South San Pete, North San Pete, I mean, their work is amazing, but it's a small rural district. And so I think we now have a method to really better understand the needs of each school within the LEA, even in rural districts. So I just want to thank again Aaron's work, Sam's work, Elise's work, and especially Scott. This was a really challenging issue because of we had to change the formula because nobody qualified. And so then it was very upsetting to many LEAs. So I think we have it fixed.
That's helpful. Thank you. And, you are quick to praise the work in the field and the work of fellow staff members. But when we were going through a lot of turnaround presentations and school improvement situations, so many times, whether it was in public or behind the scenes, people said, who made the biggest difference was Dr. Estrada and her team. So while you're quick to praise everyone else's work, your work is phenomenal and has impacted students all across this state. We don't get to see you that often. You're probably over in standards and assessment more. They get to have you, but while you're here, I'm going to give you some public kudos because we certainly appreciate the impact you have on the lives of kids. So thank you.
Scott Jones, is that Scott one of your personalities? Because that might get confusing.
Yeah, Scott, the many personalities of Scott. We appreciate it. It's a team effort, right?
One of my avatars, yes. So,
yeah, okay. I was glad you were there. I thought maybe you'd left for a second, but
I'm seeking
we
a
wouldn't want
motion.
one of your personalities to get confused.
Vice Chair Kelly, would you be willing to give that motion for us?
Yes, I'm looking here. I'm gonna move that the committee approve R277632 funding for at-risk students and students learning English, draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor as stated. And seeing no hands, we have a motion that the committee approve R277632, funding for at-risk students and students learning English draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Those in favor say aye.
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 And those opposed?
No.
And that passes with member Bogus opposed. Thank you. Let's go to 1.13. Action R277-634 grants and scholarships, which is new. And we have analyst Greg Connell and school nursing and wellness specialist Kendra Muir.
Thank you, Chair Davis. This is a new rule, R277-634. The idea behind this new rule is that as grants and scholarships come and run out of money or are changed from time to time, we're trying to get ahead of creating a bunch of new rules and then having to repeal those rules and then losing those rule numbers due to them being repealed. And so the idea would be we create this one rule for that we can put all the grants and scholarships in there. And then as they expire, we can repeal them from this rule, but it saves us some rule numbers for the future. So we're hoping this works. It is a little different than some of the other rules you might see due to the fact that it does contain multiple different grants and scholarships in it. And so we'll just kind of go from there. So the first little bit is our authority and purpose. And then as you get down in R2777634-2, we put in the definitions that are needed in this rule. R2777634-3, this basically just talks about it being a grant and scholarship rule and gives the general administration over scholarships. And when you get to section 4, the Cardiac Emergency Response Plan grant program, this is a new grant that was issued in this last legislative session. And so this part of the rule basically dictates how the USBE will start administering the Cardiac Emergency Response Plan grants. Now, for a number of these grants, there are also components. For instance, the Cardiac Emergency Response Plan. Every LEA is supposed to have one of those. We don't anticipate that that plan will disappear. And so we will be adding for our next Finance Committee meeting, bringing back another rule, the CPR rule with the Cardiac Emergency Plan in that as well, to have more information on the Cardiac Emergency Response Plan. And that rule we plan to have stick around for quite a while. And the monitoring for the plans themselves will go into that rule, while the grant money, which is about $200K that was allocated by the legislature, will stay in this rule. And then R2777634-5, the Citizenship Scholarship Program. This is also another grant program that or scholarship program that we received from the legislature this last session, and section 5 dictates how this one will be deeded out by the board.
Thank you. I think it'll be helpful for LEAs to have all of these put in one place as they come in. So thank you, Chair Hymas.
Yeah, thank you. Just for clarity, the grants within the rule are not new. We're just simply voting on the rule, like making this rule with the grants inside it, moving things, right? And saying, yeah, we approve of this method. Is that correct?
Chair Davis?
Yes, please.
The Cardiac Emergency Response Plan, that is a new grant that was issued this last session, so they're not necessarily old grants. Currently, this rule only has 2 grants in it. The plan is to, moving forward, put the grants and scholarships in this rule. So you'll find that there are still grants and scholarships in other rules that might still be being carried out. But going forward, we hope that this will make it easier so you don't have to repeal so many rules. We can just go to one rule and repeal the section.
Will this also be easier, do you think, for LEAs to find all of these in one place as they ultimately get added in?
I think that having some uniformity might make it easier for LEAs to be able to go to one place and find all the different options that they have. So hopefully it's ease of use for us and also ease of finding for the LEAs.
Okay, I'm looking for hands or seeking a motion. Anyone is willing?
I will make that motion.
Thank you.
I move that the committee approve R277634, grants and scholarships draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor as stated. Any discussion to the motion? Okay, there's a motion that the committee approve R277-634 grants and scholarships draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. That passes unanimously. Let's go to 114, R277-100, definitions for Utah State Board of Education rules.
Thank you, Chair Davis. I'm also taking these next ones. R277-100, this is our definitions rule. And the reason we're bringing this up is because these next few rules that we're going to talk about all kind of mesh together and have related parts. And one of those related parts that they have are the definitions. And we found that if, we have definitions that are the same in 3 different rules, we thought it might just be more prudent to put it in R277-100. So you'll see that in the next few rules that we discuss, there's a number of rules, there's a number of definitions that are now being moved over to R277-100. And so we've added in absence. We wanted to stress that part of this definition for absence means that the student doesn't show up to class at all. And then we also added in attendance validated learning. This basically means kids that are sitting in seats, and Leonard validated learning, that basically means kids that are online. And then we also have moved the definitions for instructional day and instructional hours to R277-100.
Thank you. Questions, members? I've got one too. Chair Hymas.
Yeah, just can we go back to the absence real quick? And I'm not sure. I mean, has that been typically the definition of absence? Is that found somewhere else? I just know that schools, if they're later than 15 or 20 minutes, they'll mark them absent. Is that something that schools would not have the ability to do in the future?
And I had the same question.
So for data purposes, they would not mark them absent unless they didn't show up to class at all. And the reason being is there's a few other definitions that are being added in. And I see that Director Aaron Bruff is on here, and he was involved in a lot of these conversations. So I will, if it's okay with you, Chair, turn it over to him.
Sure. Director Bruff.
Thank you. So sharing that there's 2 levels of definition that we're looking at. And by the way, I'm getting a message that my internet is unstable, so I apologize. Are you still able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So there's the class level absence, and then there's also a day aggregate absent, and we'll be looking at both of those because of the change in the laws that we'll be seeing in other rules that we'll be going through today. You'll see that there's some differences in between those two. So what we're saying right here is an absent is it's 100% they're missing. This does not have to do with the excused or the unexcused right now. All it's just saying is the student is absent. They're not there, and we're not confusing it with, well, they were tardy or they're late. That's a subset of being present, which is just kind of the opposite. But when we're saying absent, then it goes absolutely to that definition. They were not there 100%. And as we aggregate that, then for other purposes, when we start saying, well, what is a day absence? That's going to be 50%, which is a definition that the attendance team has been working on. So if they miss half the day, then the LEAs and the schools would consider that as a day absent. Hopefully that answers. It's a little complicated.
I have additional questions, but Member Bogus?
So my question is, let's just say, for example, class starts at 8, ends at 9, and the student shows up at 8:50. That's an absence. That's not a presence that's tardy. Are we going to move to define these other things that they show up within the first 15 minutes of class? Or are we going to get into some heavy duty semantics?
Director Bruff, do you have
Sure.
answers? I mean, we all have similar questions. We're all kind of thinking on the same, because LEAs choose to sort of define and do this differently. So we're just trying to wrap our heads around this.
And sharing the work that we're doing right now is making sure that there is a unified definition and understanding all the way through. So again, what we're trying to distinguish is absence, again, is 100% not there. Tardy is there for a portion of the day, and those tardies roll over into truancy rules and regulations, and they also have to deal with were they excused, unexcused, so on and so forth. So just kind of sharing is that the definition and thinking through of how to get this an absence. And this is, again, the proposal. It's 100% not there. So if a teacher takes a role and they're not there at all, they're not there. But if they show up later, then it's marked as a tardy or a late or however it's coded within that SIS system. And that would get treated slightly different. So they're still there, but what happens is now you have to start aggregating from a class into a full day. And so those business rules need to start stacking on top of each other.
So if a
Eric,
student
to bring
go ahead,
bring up,
Kelly.
yeah, sorry, Cindy. To bring up I'm going to follow up on the example that Member Bogus brought up, and that's okay. If a class lasts 1 hour long, and one student walks in 1 minute late, they're tardy. And if another student walks in 50 minutes late, you're saying that that student was tardy, not absent, according to
My
this
exact
definition.
same question.
I think Superintendent Nui has her hand up, I think.
Oh, I did not see it. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I can't use the digital one because I'm sharing my screen.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ground us kind of in, I think it's helpful to ground us in the conversation about where the larger philosophical conversation that we're having about attendance, because I think that's where we're finding ourselves right now, is in the past, we've kind of erred toward the side of meaningful participation and allowing LEAs to define what meaningful participation looks like in school. Right. And we've had questions about whether or not we're doing a good job of that over the state. How is this being measured? And we've had our attendance audit, for example, that said, well, we can't even really look at this on a state level because everyone is defining attendance so differently. It's not even comparing apples to apples, right? If I'm, 10 minutes late to my class here, is that the same as being, 50 minutes late over here? If I don't know, that's what's being measured from one school to the next. So we saw the legislation in preparing for these next 4 rules that you'll see. So it's 100, 607, 419, and 484 all deal with the same topics. And that's largely the definitions of and how attendance is calculated. And in those conversations, we looked at the legislation and said, Senator Fillmore, for example, Representative Welton, all have passed legislation in the last year that standardize or attempt to standardize the definitions that we're using to calculate and to measure attendance. So in these rules that we're proposing to you today, we are taking the philosophy of saying, we are going to standardize them in the best way that we possibly can for data measurement purposes first, and then allowing LEAs to have some flexibility in how their individual LEA and school policies look. that's a policy choice that we're kind of handing now to you as board members to say, is that the direction that you want to go based on the statewide conversations, based on this legislation that was passed by Senator Fillmore? Do you want us as staff to continue going in this direction of standardizing our definitions? And then we can start to have that conversation about, well, what does meaningful participation look like? And how does that figure into our conversations about attendance? But hopefully that makes sense or helps somewhat.
May I ask a question? Sorry, I'm not fast.
Yes, go ahead.
So if to Superintendent Nui, perhaps through the chair, I'm wondering if we're talking about meaningful participation, then what do we do with the kids that show up and do nothing? Are they absent? And I'm talking about overtly obstinate humans that show up and do nothing. There's no attempt to engage at all.
They put their head down on the desk and sleep, you know.
Among other things, but yes, that is a great example, Member Kelly.
Mm-hmm. I can start and then pass that off to Director Bruff, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
That is exactly the question that we are grappling with as staff when we were putting these on paper was, okay, sure, they're in class, but is that really attending class? And so we are erring on the side of we're going to take the most literal interpretation of the term absence. We're going to use that as our baseline so that we at least have a baseline to work with. And then from there, I would hope that these policy conversations that you all have as board members can be more of those, well, what do we do with these kids who are technically there, but are not engaged? And what does that look like, right? But at least we have that baseline data of understanding what this word means fundamentally. That's my answer as a lawyer. I'll pass it off to Erin, the much brighter.
Thank you, Director Bruff.
And sharing a similar response where it's a lot of research or information, especially where we use both the learner validated and the attendance validated program. The tendency in literature and in research is to use attendance and the opposite, absence, as a proxy for engagement. This we know, and like you just brought up, so wait a minute, is this a true engagement or a true measurement of engagement? The answer is no, we know it's not. It kind of depends on how it's being utilized in the programs that the LEAs are utilizing. So for the learner validated process, it very much is more, if that makes sense, more into the realm or closer relation between what is an engagement and how does that translate over to attendance. But your example that we've all teachers who've not have seen, wait a minute, someone's here, they're not engaged. But with that said, it goes back to what Dr. Newey was saying, where we're working on the very base fundamental definitions based upon how the laws were written and how do we standardize and make sure the LEAs, and by the way, that's part of the changes that we're seeing is a lot of the calculations and tracking is now being pushed down to the LEAs for the responsibilities. And the feedback that we've received from multiple LEAs is USBE really needs to hammer out the exact meanings of these definitions so there is no question what this means. Hopefully that helps.
May I follow up?
Yes.
Chair? I'm wondering, and I'm just going to use another example because I don't really know how to articulate the question. You have 20 kids in a class and 5 sit in the back row and talk the whole time. They're not asleep, but they're certainly not engaged. Are we addressing that in this? Because I'm very concerned that you can show up 15 minutes or 50 minutes late and be present, but you can be present in the room and disrupt the entire class and also be present. That to me is, we've got a conundrum here that is going to upset a lot of apple carts.
Yeah, thank you. It looks like we have Benji Carter, our Director of Youth in Custody, and schools, and I'm guessing you also help work on this rule. So let's go ahead and hear from Benji, and then we'll hear from Vice Chair Kelly.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to point out this definition is the exact definition from Fillmore's bill, Senate Bill 58 that was passed. And so this language is just is now in statute in 53G6-201. And so this is just updating the definitions in our board rule to follow along with what is now in statute for the definition of absence.
That was exactly my question, if this was in code. And I think I said Carter, and Benji, I know it's Carrier. I apologize.
It's okay.
Always good to see you.
Been called much worse, so you're fine.
Benji's awesome. He does great work. Vice Chair Kelly.
Okay, so I guess this rule, the R277100, is definitions, right? And so what this document is doing is defining what attendance or what absence means, right? But then are we planning to add in what tardy means? Are we going to add in, are there other definitions that need to go in here that relate to attendance? Because as you know, as Board Member Bogus and I have mentioned, okay, if it's an hour-long class and they show up 50 minutes into class, okay, technically speaking, according to this rule now, they're not absent, but are they, is it a severe tardy, or, anything after a half hour into class is categorized as something else? Are we adding more definitions to, to establish attendance policy, I guess is what my question is.
We need a barely there option.
Yes.
Yeah. Director Connell, I think, is going to answer your question, Vice Chair Kelly. His hand is up.
Yes, thank you, Chair Davis. To Vice Chair Kelly's question, we do in the you'll see in the next rules there is a lot of different moving parts that all mesh together with these definitions, and truancy and tardy are going to be in 607 as well. And so that's when we get to that, that'll make more sense. But just to front load it, truancies can only be marked if a student has missed half of the day, and that's at the school level. A school teacher can use either absence or tardy for marking the students. But the teacher can't use truancy because it's at the school level for purposes of data collection.
They can't use tardy if they come for 5 minutes. So they don't really have a choice. They can only use tardy. They can't use absent.
Let me clarify that. So you're saying truancy, they can only be marked truant if they miss more than half the day?
At the LEA level, no classroom level. But they can mark unexcused absence.
Yes.
Can't they?
Yes.
Correct. And some of these issues we may want to just get to the next rules down, because it probably will help us flesh some more of this.
So all we're doing right now is just adding a definition in here for absence. And absence is if you were not there at all, period.
And to every single person who's commented on this committee, that may be a legislative request change, because I see that definition as highly problematic.
Yeah,
Yes.
you kind of sense that this individual has no classroom experience, right?
Yeah. Yes. Benji Carrier, please.
Just quickly, I know you're going to move on. As far as LEAs, individual LEAs do set a lot of their own attendance codes. that go deeper into what you're talking about. So, Chair, you literally said that it sounds like there should be a barely there. That's actually a code in Ogden School District. They do have a B code for, they call it basically absent, but it's literally for that exact reason, is that if a kid showed up with with just a few minutes left. I mean, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but they did have a very specific time frame that, like for the first 15 minutes of missed instruction, then it counted as a tardy. And then if it was like 16 minutes and beyond, then it was a B code for basically absent. So, I mean, individual LEAs do set a lot of these. To Aaron's point, though, that is part of what makes attendance data so difficult, is because every single LEA has a completely different set of their own unique codes, which can make things challenging. So within that, though, ultimately, all of those codes, and Aaron can correct me if I'm wrong, but with all of these unique, I mean, because they'll have like medical code, they'll have parent excused, they'll have excused, unexcused, mountain biking, this, that. I mean, they have all of these different individual codes, but ultimately they all have to be in the data system based on it's either a valid excuse or it's not a valid excuse. And that's ultimately what the code has to go to. And so I think right now Fillmore was, and I just can't speak directly for him, but coming to a point of just saying the term absent just means you weren't there. Like that's all that it means. And then all of these individual little more clarifying codes get set by schools.
Yeah. Okay. That's helpful. Thank you. Let's go to Chair Hymas and then Deputy Nui.
I lowered my hand, Cindy. I was just going to complain some more, but I won't.
Okay, Deputy Nui.
I'll just add, sorry, really fast. So 100 is the rule that you all have for definitions that are standardized across all of your rules. A lot of times definitions actually vary between rule to rule. For example, LEA may mean, may include USDB in some of our rules and not include USDB in some of our rules, right? So these are definitions that as we've gone through the rest of our rules to say, actually, when we say absence, we want it to mean this one thing every time. Now we can have other terms, right, that can parse out some of those nuances, but we want to make sure that every time we use a particular word within our rules, it means the same thing. So these were the words that we decided needed to be consistent across all of our rules for valid data and funding purposes to make it super clear.
And I completely understand for funding purposes, for connection purposes, there is a difference. If a kid shows up for 5 minutes, they're still connecting to the school. It is different for intervention than if that kid's at 7-Eleven all day, every day, and you don't know where he or she is. So I do get that. But I guess the question is, the schools can still, I'm hearing, use the basically absent or use the unexcused or use all the things they want to use. But then then do they have to redo a second code for our data to know what we just need to know whether they showed up or not for like ADM and other funding purposes? Do they have to do a second code for that, or does whatever the teacher add in, the district then can sort of recode that and send the data to us? Or are we saying that every teacher now has to mark a child present if they show up for 5 minutes on the teacher records?
See, Aaron's got his hand up and he's
Aaron, Director Bruff.
It's fine. It's an awesome question. Here's the answer: is we are working with the board to get to both. Here's what was in the law. Here's now the definition, and this is going to be unified for all the data systems for us. When we say, and this kind of goes back to Elise's, what she's talking about is we are standardizing what the definition is across the board. The LEAs will have some flexibilities within those definitions for sure to do additional resources and checks, but when it comes to, again, the calculations of chronic absenteeism, the calculations of being present.
Yeah.
And then for these, like we're saying, rolling over for example, for the 10-day rule, a disengagement, or for when they are going to do habitually truant, or any of those calculations that they all need to do now, is we need to have these definitions set. And that's the request for the board. So again, going back to Elise, it's got to mean one thing, and it's got to mean that thing all the way through. Else we just get unknowns in our data sets that are just impossible to regulate or to understand or track.
Sure. Thank you. Member Bogus.
I'm sorry. I know Member Hymas said he wasn't going to complain anymore. I'm going to. I'm wondering what we do to address the overriding of absenteeism at the office level or the administrative level. And I'm going to give you an example. Say we have a student, they are technically present in the school that day, but they spent the first half of the day in the counselor's office and didn't show up to their first 4 classes. They are overtly and like apparently absent from those classes. Those teachers mark them absent, and then the office changes that designation in the office. Yet when it comes to test scores, those teachers are held accountable as if that student was in class that day. And that's not fair in sporting. And so I understand the need to have a definition for chronic absenteeism, but there needs to be some accommodation and how do I want to articulate it? Some mechanism to understand classroom absences. And another example is if they're pulled for groups or if they go to resource. There's a lot of times students get specialized math instruction during my class time, but that does not mean they're present for music. That means they're absent from music. And so there's lots of situations wherein we are holding teachers accountable by and through their assessment scores, which is, I think it's 10 or 20% of their evaluation metric. And then we have students who are technically absent but marked present. How are we accommodating for that? And are we accommodating for that?
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing and sensing is we're going to have 2 different systems or 2 different opportunities for record keeping. One that's going to be a technical record keeping, because for funding, for example, the child that's in that counseling office still would have to be present at school because that child should still get funded for ADM. But the teacher needs to be able to mark that child absent for all the practical purposes that you just mentioned. So I think we're probably going to get to a space where schools are going to have their set of criteria, and then they're going to, just for funding purposes, have this other set of criteria. But maybe let's hear from Director Bruff, and then I think we do need to start going through these rules, because that will be more where we need to, if we're going to make any kind of requests or changes, it's going to be in the rules, because these definitions, from what I'm understanding, are in code. All of these definitions are in code, so we might.
If that's the case, I have one more question then.
Okay, ask your question, then we'll go to Director Bruff, and then we'll move to the next agenda item. Okay, go
So
ahead.
if every one of these things is in code, is it the intention of this bill sponsor that when we take kids to Lagoon, that they are not to be funded for that day? Because lines 114 through 117 are very indicative that a day in which an LEA designated learner, whatever, line 115, days where educational services are not actively provided to students. So if we go on a football game, that is not an instructional day. If we go to Lagoon, that is not an instructional day. If we have a a movie party in the afternoon, that would be 0.5 days of non-instruction. Is that the intent of this?
I will tell you that when I take kids to the lagoon, it's a tremendous learning experience. No, I understand what you're saying, Board Member Bogus, and I'm not trying to make light of your question, but lagoon I think is an outlier for sure. But I think sporting events and extracurricular activities, I think there is learning that's taking place there. So
Well, I'm not saying that learning doesn't take place, Member Kelly. What I'm saying is that it's not solely instructional. It says days where educational services are not provided to students.
If it's a school-sponsored activity, would it be considered an educational service, even if it's not as educational as like math class?
I don't know. I just don't know that riding a bus for 6 hours is an educational thing that would qualify as instruction.
Yeah, these are all really good questions, and we may just need to talk with the bill sponsor to seek greater clarity as we go. Or, ask for greater clarity. We're going to, one final comment from Director Bruff, and then we're going to move on. How are we going to vote for this when everybody doesn't like that definition? But
I'm just going to state, appreciate the conversation, definitely. And yes, we're looking at the complexities and moving beyond because there's flexibility for the LEAs. I just wanted to respond where you said, well, there's going to be two systems.
Oh, I know you.
My answer to you
I know.
We are trying really hard to make sure that there is a single, and when I say single system, I'm not talking about an SIS or anything. I'm saying a single understanding. And that's just commenting back saying, this is the definition section of 100 where we're saying, this is what it's going to mean. Obviously, if the board says, no, we want to change it, that's the board's prerogative.
But it's not if it's in code.
I won't
It's not our prerogative if it's in code.
Thank you.
We have an illusion of freedom that is actually not there. So yeah, thank you for that. And I think if anything's going to change, it's going to have to be sought later. But I think we should try to maybe get through the rules, the subsequent rules.
do you need a motion for that? I know.
Yeah, let's get the motion now that just to show that we recognize that this is the language in code and that let's see if we need to speak any changes in rule.
I move that the committee approves R277 100 definitions for Utah State Board of Education rules draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Thank you. And just a quick note, this is tons of definitions, not just attendance.
But attendance is the only one.
That's what's been added. Yes, right. That's been added. Yes. There's a motion on the floor that the committee approves R277-100 definitions for Utah State Board of Education rules, draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Those in favor say aye.
Aye. I'm a reluctant yes, Cindy, mostly because I don't want to have this conversation next month times 3, right? When we have 3 times the board members.
I know.
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
I know. Those opposed?
No.
Okay. Thank you. That passes with Member Bogus opposed. Go ahead, Member Kelly.
Maybe what we do on the agenda in the full board is put 116 before 114, because I think maybe 116 is going to help clarify why that definition is important.
Yeah, I think so also. So we can look at rearranging that when we go. But let's go to 115 now. R27-419 pupil accounting amendment. Is Policy Advisor Wadsworth here today?
Chair Davis, I'm taking all the next ones for her since she's in a different committee right now.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
no worries. And unfortunately, I think she gave me 3 more Pandora's boxes to open. So bear with me here.
Okay.
And remember, I'm the messenger, and the real one you want to go after is Jennifer. So
Okay. Got
so
it.
R277419, this is the pupil accounting rule. We've removed the oversight category from this rule. We've included required code references for data quality standards and accountability measures to the newly added sections. We've added a few definitions to R277100, taken them from this rule and moved them over to R277100. Added continuing enrollment measures. This is basically how online schools track the kids. We've clarified that students in learner validated programs get an unexcused absence, which includes the failure to meet the LA's continuing enrollment measure requirements as required from code. And then in lines 244, 295, 434, and 476 to 480, we've added clarification from the legislative session to add in the new option of equivalent instructional hours. This is referencing the Welton bill that added to code that 1 credit hour equals 183 instructional hours. And then we've added in new sections, so R277419, sections 12 through 14. And these sections basically coordinate with the new data requirements that LAs have to monitor and establish minimum data quality standards on how excused and unexcused absences are recorded. And so there's R277419.
Okay, in the interest of time, I'm going to put a motion on the floor and then take comments for the motion. I move that the committee approves R277-419 pupil accounting draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Discussion to the motion. Member Bogus.
Thank you. I'd like to start, if I could please, at lines 101 and 102. If those are actually derived from code, why don't we cite the code lines instead of the rule? Is there a reason?
This is instructional day,
Yes.
instructional hours.
Typically, if it's derived from code, we cite the code.
I don't think code, we have the onus on instructional hours and number of instructional days. I don't think it's in code.
So then what was the comment about deriving that language about Welton's bill?
The definition of attendance?
No, it says 180 days or equivalent instructional hours. A bill was mentioned, which to me.
Oh, is that new? I always thought that was the purview of the board.
I'm asking because that's why I'm confused.
Yeah, well, it's a good question. I maybe I've been under misunderstanding all these years.
Welton's bill adds in that 1 credit hour equals 183 instructional hours. And this is for the equivalent instructional hour part. So I think that's what I was talking about. Member Bogus, I apologize if there's confusion on the other 2 definitions.
Oh, no apology necessary. I want to make certain we're on the same page. So then could I possibly, Chair, take us to 243?
Yes.
So this makes no sense to me at all, I'll be honest, because it says an LEA shall provide services for a minimum of 180 instructional days. And now we have this weird instructional day definition that will likely extend the school year in some capacity. But what is the length of an instructional day? For example, some schools start at 8, they end at 2:30. They have an hour of recess and 30 minutes of lunch. So technically their instructional day is 5 hours. So how are we calculating this? And then you have, in the other hand, you have schools that begin at 8 o'clock and end at 4 with the same mechanism, and their instructional day is significantly longer. They would have what would be at or about the equivalent of, okay, I got to do the math real quick, 7 to 8 instructional hours in the day. So how is this? This doesn't seem to play out in its logical conclusion the way it's written.
I'll just quickly take a minute to add in some context there too. Is We used to have in this rule, it used to say 180 educational service days or 990 instructional hours. So there was a double component there. And then
That was taken out in December of 2022.
yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
LEAs wanted flexibility, and especially it was after COVID, and then some people were doing online types of things, and some people were doing like a mastery. If a student could show mastery, then did they need to sit still on the desk for that many hours, or could the LEA be a little bit flexible in how they organize the child's schedule? So that's why it was changed. In fact, people that wanted to take out both, they got the 990 hours out, but they never were effective at taking out the 180 days.
So how do we determine equivalent instructional hours?
You don't.
So now we have a kind of a useless thing in here. I mean that I'm trying to be respectful.
Yes.
I'm wondering about the usability at the LEA level, and especially for data reporting, because if it can't be computed, then we're going to end up with data issues down the line. And I see Director Buff's hand, so I'm going to shut up and let him respond.
So yeah, it's student outcomes. What the point was is if you can have the flexibility and still show the outcomes and the increased growth for students, that was kind of the thought. I wasn't the one pushing it, but I'm just saying that was kind of the thought.
Okay.
Director Bruff, go ahead.
Thank you. And I hope my understanding is correct and doesn't confuse us as well. I just wanted to reiterate the 180 days is how we calculate for membership and for the financial purposes for the
I sent you an email.
of the 990 hours that or 990 hours, that flexibility was added, but within, again, with the legislation, and just kind of sharing, especially on the one bill that was cited earlier, where it's like, what there was a concern that some courses were just not equivalent. And so that's why there was a state of it needs to be equal to this many hours. So I believe the reason why the board rule has that language in there is we're still requiring the LEAs to submit days that they are giving services, but there's also now a new line indicating that if you are doing services such as an SOAP course, an online course, whatever, you can't just say, well, they just started it and they finished it within a week or a day or whatever, or you cannot do it as a package. There has to be some background or some backing behind it to make sure that there is equivalent hours, or they that would be utilized in the full day calculation. Hopefully that makes sense.
Thank you.
I believe Superintendent Nui is raising her hand. I could be wrong.
Oh, Deputy Nui?
I don't want to prolong the conversation, but this is also stuff we've been grappling with for months. So we have lots of things to say. But
okay. Can you say them?
Sure. Okay. So I think part of the conversation too is what were we just talking about? The 180 days. So right now we have a lot of schools who are on like a 4-day waiver, for example. So they have asked the board for a waiver from the requirement that there be 180 days. And the way that they do that is they come to law and licensing and then the full board, and they explain how they're still meeting all of the overriding purposes of school while not meeting the requirement of the 180 days. When I talk to superintendents about this rule change, they're all like, well, what does this look like in function? And we said, we don't know. This is going to be new territory where you as LEAs are going to have to decide what would that look like for your school and how would you go about justifying that if there were to be an audit. And overwhelmingly, all of the superintendents said, we will not go there. That does not sound fun. That does not seem worth the effort. We're not going to go there. So I think we're putting it, functionally speaking, we're putting it in rule to say, this is an option. if you so choose, LEA, you can go with the 83-hour calculation, but you're going to need to come up with how you justify that to make that work with all of the other things. And once you do, let us know, and we will pave the way for other LEAs to do that. But I think right now it's still uncharted territory. Schools have gotten used to the 180 days, and that's kind of where we're at, functionally speaking.
Can you review that with us again? Because I was looking down on the line where we require 180 hours. So what exactly are we changing to?
So this is so in 419, it says equivalent instructional hours. And this is coming from Welton's bill, where he says that high schools should have the ability, well, the state school board shall establish the number of days or equivalent instructional hours. Up until now, the board has decided we're going with days. But Welton's bill adds that for high schools that use an attendance validated program, they can calculate using credits for class hours. So every 83 or every credit is equivalent to 83 class hours in lieu of, so to replace our 180-day requirement. So again, this was Welton. From my conversations with Welton, he took the NEBO calculation. He took his high schools in the NEBO school district and said, well, essentially how many credit or how many class hours is equal to a credit, multiplied that by the number, right, and got what he needed. But every LEA has the ability to decide how many credits are required, right? So we actually have different numbers of required credits across our state. So there's not a way for us right now to standardize this and say, this is what this should look like. Rather, this is something that has been given to LEAs as a possibility by the legislature. And I think as a state, as staff, what we're proposing is we put that into the rule to say you can do this, but you're going to need to figure out what that would actually look like and come back to us and let us know. Because right now, yeah, it does run in the face of several of the things that we have set up when it comes to credits, when it comes to our pupil accounting, all of those things are based on this idea of the 180 days. So
am I reading this right? That'd be like 2,000 hours for a 24 credit diploma.
Yeah, it doesn't exactly add up with a lot of our high schools. So it makes it a little complicated.
Well, and some require 28 hour diplomas. That's a lot more than a 990-hour requirement that we had in the past. Unless I'm reading it wrong or understanding what.
May I, Cindy?
1 credit, 83 class hours seems, yeah, go ahead, Member Bogus.
So they're talking about credits required to graduate. Not all credits taken are required to graduate. So in some sense, your comment makes perfect sense, and in other spaces it doesn't. But I know high schools that have each term is logged as if it were college credit. So if you're in class 3 days a week on an AB schedule, then it's a 3 credit class. Well, that's 3 times 83. So this is not going to play out well for our data requiring purposes and reporting purposes if you've got a school that gives 3 credits for a class, whereas perhaps maybe Nebo School District only gives 1 credit for what would be the equivalent coursework.
Yes, I'm just even more to the point. Even more to the point.
Yeah,
that would be well over what we had originally required at 990. But anyway, let's see.
We've got some work to do.
Do we have any other?
Is this a time sensitive one, or can we put this out in June? I think we need to have a second discussion on this. I don't know that we have time today, Chair Davis, and I'm not trying to be the delayer of all good things. I'm just trying to make certain we don't send this to the board and have Crazyville ensue.
Well, it already is because it's in code, but let me ask, which of these last action items? So we've got 1, 2, 3 action items. which of these three are the most time sensitive? Is Deputy Jones?
Well, so Madam Chair, you and I and the Chair Hymas had talked about the possibility of having another Finance Committee meeting to get to these action items, plus talk more about the information item that's at the end related to, preparing for the next legislative session with funding requests. So, but my understanding is that, that would be very difficult with Memorial Day coming up and stuff to do a meeting so that, these additional rules that we're trying to get to today, including 419, could get to the board in June for your June meeting, right? Because if you meet after the June meeting, that means any of these will not go until your August meeting. I mean, just timeline wise, because you don't meet in July. So
There were just some members that really couldn't meet in May,
we
but
understand.
May was just difficult.
Right. So, but to the first question about the timing of this, from my perspective, I think that, we would better serve the LEAs if we did have this in place before July, I mean, all things considered, but I do understand the concern with, well, then you debate this, more in board meeting without all these other questions and the committee having sufficient time to do it. But if, Dr. Newey or Deborah or Sam say, no, the LEAs can wait, for this. 419 I would say, is probably the most or biggest rule as it pertains to business operations, right? And understanding and doing that sets conditions for the next fiscal school year.
And I think to Member Bogus, I wonder if the language is going to be okay as far as the required to graduate, because probably the better language to use would have been allowable by the LEA to graduate and the state, because we require certain things and then the LEAs require additional things sometimes on top of that. That probably would have been better, more clear language. But I'm guessing that's the intent and that's what it means.
Cindy, what was the reason why you felt like we couldn't meet another time this month?
There were members that I contacted that had different school work schedules and out of town schedules, and I went through a variety of days and it was difficult to find one in May. What I can do is ask Cami to do a doodle poll of like every single day in May. And when we get to the one that has the most people, we could go for it. My only thought, though, is that these things that we're expressing concern over are all in code. So our only option really is if we want to add a request for clarity or something to change in the code. So if we need more time to study the rules because we think we may want to do something like that, then I think, we can postpone and have her do a doodle poll and just try to get as many as possible. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, I think that would be the best thing to do. Yeah, because I do, like, I'm looking, like, I know that the R277, the 607, the absenteeism and truancy, I think that needs to be done before August, because we're going to have, school year starts in August, and to be able to get the word out to people as to what we've done with absenteeism would be important, I think.
Yes. So if I may, Madam Chair, both 419 and 607, I mean, it's best that we give as much lead time for LEAs to implement whatever changes the board adopts or, ratifies from your recommendations to these rules ahead of the start of the next school year. So, we're just bumping up against time. Time's always the enemy. It's tough to do these things. If I may, just real quick, ma'am, if you can scroll down a little further, Cami, on the agenda, because you were asking about the items. So I think that all of these items, or I would recommend that these items go, to a special committee, right?
Okay.
But one that, if we can, to your point, Cammy can do a doodle poll and pull these out because,
before June.
well, but the other piece to this too is that we have the information item on 1.22 that, well, so all these information items, from 19 through 21, we haven't been able to get to in the last couple of meetings, which I know they're information items. So if we could just emphasize, look at the updates to them, do that. But 1.22 was intended to be covered today so that we can start the process that typically starts in your May Finance Committee meeting for identification of potential funding requests by the board, right? To that. So I don't know, we talked.
And I think we need to request that be an action item in this extra meeting. I
Okay.
think we need to request that be an action item. And I think let's go ahead. Look, we did well today. We got through like 14 action items. That was
Very
a lot.
good. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we didn't have, when we had to set this agenda and we knew we're heading into our busy time for the finance committee, we knew this was probably going to be a reality, and we hoped we could do the extra meeting in June, but because Eliezer, we don't meet in July, we probably need to get some of this to the full board in June. We'll ask Cami if you will do that, send a doodle poll out to the committee members, and we have 60 seconds, and I promised we would end right at noon for those driving into this building. Are there any final comments from any committee members or staff for the last 60 seconds that we need to know?
Chair, my only question is, could we, and I know this is very hard on our staff, could we consider a Saturday in May?
Do the doodle poll.
Yeah, I don't think we can ask, I don't want to ask our staff to do a Saturday.
Okay. Then let's just do the doodle poll and see what we come up with.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, look, it'd probably be better for a lot of people actually, but I'd hate to do that.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you, though. I do see how May is so tricky, but thank you. Okay. Well, this meeting then is adjourned. Thanks, everybody. That was a lot of work. Appreciate all of your help and
Appreciate all of you.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.